Oh yeah, we got to overturn.
You're listening to the E-Men, inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. I think, oh, by the way, if we're fashionably late, that's okay. You know, sometimes tech issues get in the way. It's not the first time that's happened to us. It won't be the last. So sorry about that. We were working through those issues, but not a moment too soon. And we'll be off and running with our guest momentarily. But I believe he was the first transit EMRU guy I had on was Franco Baraducci. And then I think that same week I had John Bushing. Not too long after that was Anita Rosato, and not too long after Anita was Ken Schnetzler. So EMRU has had a nice imprint on this show. We've gotten guys from EMRU, even though they weren't around too long before the merger kicked in with the NYPD Emergency Service Unit. We've also had guys from Housing Rescue, with which EMRU had a hand in training those guys when they were getting ready to get going. Now, tonight's guest who will introduce in a bit, I think he reached out through my website, MikeColónmedia.com. We knew a lot of the same people, and he was telling me his background. I'm like, well, you got to come on the show. So we've been haggling about a date for a while now, and finally, he's here tonight for this volume 52 of a miniseries that I have not done since July, the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit, with a man, although not in the NYPD ESU, was in the NYPD eventually, and had a 7-year stint in transit rescue. Hello to everybody tuning in. Donna Weaver, I see you. I still got to listen to your voice messages. I didn't forget. Good to see all you tuning in tonight. Chris Ebden, Terry Murnane, John Costello. And just briefly before we run the ads, I posted about it. I won't mention the individual's name out of respect for them and their family, but we had a tragic loss yesterday in the NYPD family, a retired member of the service who posted something yesterday that alluded to them being in significant emotional distress. We tried to get that individual help and tried to get in touch with that individual. And unfortunately, despite the best efforts of all involved who saw that post, we were too late. And we weren't able to save that individual in time. And just a reminder, listen, everybody gets down. We all have moments where we struggle. We all have moments where we're not feeling in tip-top shape mentally. And it's natural. It's part of life. But, what's not okay is to suffer in silence. And if you've got something like that going on, doesn't matter who it is, reach out to somebody. It's easier said than done, but it's the strongest thing you can do because that's never the outcome that we want. And I wish that individual had done that. And my thoughts and prayers are with that individual's family tonight, who we couldn't save yesterday. So just a little reminder for those of you that know, and I'll just leave it at that. So on a happier note, we'll run a couple ads, get things going. First things first, producer Victor in the chop seat. Baseball fans, if you bleed Braves country red and blue, this one's for you. Check out the Chop Seat podcast hosted by Victor Mignetis. Every week, Victor dives deep into all things Atlanta Braves and Major League Baseball, from game recaps and trade rumors to player spotlights and the latest league news. Whether it's breaking down the lineup, debating pitching rotations, or talking postseason chances, the Chop Seat gives you honest takes, sharp analysis, and a fan's true passion for the game. So if you're looking for your go-to Braves and MLB podcast, pull up a chair and join the conversation. Subscribe to the Chop Seat today on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Because in Braves country, there's always room at the Chop Seat. Only one more week until the New York Yankees disappoint me again. Now, before we get to our guest who will introduce in a moment, you know who won't disappoint you? Bill Ryan. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike to New Haven podcast. And unlike the New York Yankees, tonight's guest and Bill Ryan both know how to come in the clutch. And my next guest worked the streets of New York City in not one but two capacities. He was first a medic with New York City EMS pre FDNY merger, of course, and later as a member of both the New York City Transit Police and the New York City Police Department when those two agencies merged in the spring of 1995. Among his many stops include the Deputy Commissioner of Training's office, and of course, that's why he's under the ESU banner for tonight, the Emergency Medical Rescue Unit, which was in existence since the fall of 1977 when Sergeant Joe Satt, a former guest of this show as well, helped start it. And of course, a distinguished career with the Transit Police along the way as well. And that for this volume 52 of the EMEN inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Former New York City EMS medic and former Transit E-man, Mike Granton. Mike, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So just tell me about those early years. Where did you grow up?
All right. So I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. It was the absolutely best place in the country you can grow up, believe it or not. I live in South Carolina now for the last almost 19 years. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you, people, New York has a very bad reputation around the country. And I think it's because we're so blunt. But I have to tell you, I've never met more honest people, more open people in New York City. So when I see people down here in South Carolina who are all Bible belters and they're all like, oh, bless your heart. Basically, they're telling you where to go. And, that doesn't go over well with us New Yorkers. And I think we now outnumber the amount of native Southerners down here. It's actually, yeah, they're running for the hills with all of us damn Yankees.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good way to put it. You go down to Carolina, it's that way. You go down to Florida, it's that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But, growing up in Brooklyn was, again, I was exposed, I think at the time there were 8 million people in New York City, and I believe 2 or 3 million of them were in Brooklyn. And you were exposed to everything and everybody. I was in basically Gravesend, Homecrest area of Brooklyn, which is just above Coney Island, north of Coney Island. And it was a fabulous place to grow up. I loved it. I mean, I never wanted my childhood to end. I don't think it ever did end. I've been blessed my whole life. And it's been totally fabulous.
Absolutely, as we'll talk about tonight. So, I mean, back then, before we get to, of course, the Transit Police and everything that involved that, did you have an inclination towards civil service? Because there's kids of a certain area that grew up in New York where you're shaking your head no, so I'll let you answer before I even finish.
Well, yeah, yes and no. So technically as a kid, all through school and high school and most of high school, I actually told my guidance counselor I wanted to be an airline pilot. That was my thing. I wanted to be a pilot my whole life. However, also as a kid, my parents, growing up in New York City, used to rent a summer house in Rocky Point, Long Island, which is the amazing thing that one of my partners actually lives in Rocky Point, Long Island, Tony Romano, a Truck 7 guy. He was a transit rescue guy, and then he moved on after the merge to Truck 7.
Yep.
Spent the whole rest of his career in ESU. And we grew up in Brooklyn right across the street from each other. I mean, one number away. I was 813, he was 812. Our houses faced each other. The first 11 years of life, we were like best buddies. We did everything together. I had a brother 3 years. I'm the youngest of 5 kids. I had a brother 3 years older, and I had 2 cousins, one the same age and one 1 year older, all in the same house. And then Rocky across the street. We called him Red at the time. And that was kind of like the gang for Avenue W in Brooklyn. And we had a great time. And his father was a city fireman. He was a chauffeur for Engine 239 in Brooklyn also. And when he was about 11 or 12 years old, I'm going to say the like 4th, 5th grade, somewhere around there, his father decided to move to greener pastures and moved out to Massapequa Park, Long Island. And we kind of totally lost touch. And it's an amazing story because 15 years later, when I finally leave EMS and I go to the police department and I show up on a job, guess who comes down the stairs with Transit EMRU? Was Tony Romano. And I have to tell you, man, I almost lost it, but it was amazing. And I'm still friends with him to this day. As a matter of fact, he called me this afternoon because his father just had back surgery. But he called. We're still in touch today, and we've been friends since we were embryos, I guess.
I'd like to get Tony on the show for the ESU because I've heard the name before. He's definitely well known against a lot of. John Bushing was in Truck 7 too, so I know John Bushing knows him. So I'd love to.
Everybody you name knows him. As a matter of fact, he was married to Anita for 10 years.
Yes.
He probably told you, don't ever put Tony on the show.
No. She did not. She did not.
No,
Anita's a
I'm
good one.
teasing. I'm teasing. And when you went over your list of EMRU people you had on, I was about to scream at you because you left out Joe said, but then you added
Yeah,
back.
I added Joe said. Yeah, how could I forget Joe?
Yeah.
As Anita said, Joe said. That's the running joke.
Right. Joe said's the reason we're all,
Yeah.
in the game, because Joe said, the best part of getting into a unit like ESU or EMRU is
Yeah.
the training. Because the training, who was it? Patty Pogan, I think, said we drive around with the giant Craftsman toolbox.
Essentially, yeah.
Essentially, yes. But the only time you get to use everything in that toolbox is during training.
Right.
Sometimes some things don't come out of that truck for a year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, we had a plasma cutting saw that, I never touched after we got trained on it, but I would have loved to have used it. You can cut like a flatbed truck in half with it, but there wasn't a lot of usage for it for us. But I'm just saying, during training, which was Joe said's forte,
right,
we got to use everything in the giant Craftsman toolbox.
And EMS was a part of that, and I think that segues perfectly into getting into New York City EMS. And I know I sound like a broken record. Hi to Dave Burns, by the way. He's in the chat when I mentioned this, and Mark Peck's watching too. But as I told Mark, as I've told a lot of these guys who on the FD and PD side who started out with New York City EMS, you guys were a different breed from the standpoint that you did so much more with so much less. It's no secret. This is not me making fun of other agencies, but you guys, unfortunately, were the bastard stepchild. And while you were working without a lot of valuable resources for quite a long time, it forced you to step up, get creative, and really think on the fly, think on your feet. So starting out in that time frame, you're a lifelong Brooklyn guy, at least up until that point in your life. Did you start your EMS career in Brooklyn too, or were you elsewhere?
No, I started but you jumped over a big part of my life. So yes, I did start my EMS career in Brooklyn also. Mm-hmm. I think Billy Gross you just had on 2 weeks ago.
Billy's in the chat, yeah.
All right. So if it wasn't for Billy Gross, I may have never got involved in any of this because Billy Gross, he said I was a year younger than him. I believe it's more like 3 or 4 years younger than him, even though it may not look that way. I noticed he had dark hair. I think he's dyeing it. But he was 3 or 4 years older than me because he was able to drive, and I wasn't able to drive at the time. And he had called, we both worked at Radio Shack. He had called from the Canarsie store to the Midwood store, and he needed something that, I don't know. And of course he called, and I answered the phone, and we were talking about something he needed. He sold there, and we may have had in stock here. But he heard the scanner going in the background, and he said, "Is that Brooklyn Fire?" And I was like, "Yeah, I listen to Brooklyn Fire all day, every day." And the next thing you know, me and Billy hooked up. And I know like Billy just brushed over it, but a big part of my life for the next 4 years, all I did 3 or 4 or 5 nights a week. If my parents knew, they would have killed me. But I would meet Billy after work. We would close the store at like 6 or 7 o'clock at night. He would come down to Midwood, pick me up in his Z28 Camaro, and we would buff fires throughout all of Brooklyn. And like he said, he had met Steve Kerr through the 70 Auxiliary Rescue. And then we met Zach Goldfarb and Mark Michaels, which he never mentioned that. They were like, as far as I knew, the first paramedics going. Zach Goldfarb, you had him on the show.
Yeah, a while ago. Great guy.
Mark Michaels is gone. God rest his soul. But let me tell you something. And they had an ambulance where they had gone to like the city auction and taken the double spinning, rotating police lights that they used to have on RMPs at the time, not the single, the pulsar. And they put it on their ambulance where you could spot it from a mile away because they were the only ambulance in the city of New York that had all these lights on it. And they also had paramedic written across the side, which I don't think anyone in New York City knew there was a paramedic in New York City. Not taking anything away from Mark Peck, who I'm sure was already a medic and already doing a fine job. It's just that he didn't get the light rack and he didn't put the big paramedic down the side of the thing like they did. I think they made it twice as big as the city wanted it. But and we buffed them all over the place. I mean, we chased them all night from 7 o'clock at night till probably 1, 2 in the morning. And then I would go home and jump into bed and wake up the next morning, go to high school sometimes, and then go to Radio Shack, and then go meet Billy Gross, and we'd do it all over again. And we did that. We went to some of the best jobs. I mean, some of your old-time firemen that were on duty in the 70s and 80s can tell you some of the jobs we went to. We went to every great job in New York City, just as buffs.
Yeah.
And we had no idea. We were just stupid kids. We had no idea the neighborhoods we were going into, the places we were going, the people we were seeing. We had nothing. We just went there with like a windbreaker that said FDNY maybe and a scanner, so it looked like we had a radio, looked like we was somebody. So nobody really messed with us. And, and I have to tell you, man, I had the time of my life with Billy Gross for almost 4 years.
Because that was the thing he said.
Before I got to the EMS portion. And the 7-0 rescue portion, actually. So Steve Kerr, he had mentioned. But we also met Robert Mackler, Timmy O'Brien. Timmy O'Brien was a 40-year detective in Manhattan South Homicide.
Jeez.
After serving in 7-0 rescue with Robert Mackler, Steve Kerr, Wade Aruz. He went on to be a correction officer. I don't know whatever happened to him. But it was fabulous people. And they all went on to civil service. So when I got transferred to Coney Island, I actually started dating Steve Kerr's sister. And Steve Kerr shows up at Radio Shack one day in a New York City ambulance. He worked for Shorefront, and he was a volunteer in the 7-0 precinct. But he showed up in a New York City ambulance. And I said, "Oh, you're working for the city? How'd you get that job?" Because this was right after the 70s, the layoffs.
Right, fiscal crisis. Ford City dropped dead.
And he said, "Mike, I walked in the door just to ask the guy some questions, and Arnold Pack sat me down, took my picture, blah, 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 filled out some paperwork and said, you start tomorrow." And at Coney Island, which we lived, he lived 4 blocks south of Coney Island. I lived 4 blocks north of Coney Island. So that's how easy he got the job. And he told me, "Go get your EMT. You could be doing this in 3 months." And I have to tell you, I mean, I didn't run out and get my EMT, but I did start going towards the ambulance route. I got hired by a local. I sent Victor a picture of Billy Gross in uniform sitting behind.
Yeah, we got it. We ran it a few weeks ago when Billy was on.
Oh yeah,
Billy with the glasses.
IUSB uniform. Did you ever see that one? The black and yellow ambulances.
I think that might be the picture we're referring to. It's going to come up momentarily.
Okay. So anyway, the thing was, no, that's Danny Haggerty. He's a great guy too. We're
different. Billy's got like his feet up on the desk, Vic.
Yeah, no, well, yes, he's laid back in the chair, but he don't have his feet up on the desk. That's Steve Kerr right there. This is when we're going to meet Chief Bratton when he became the chief of the Transit Police. Dennis Healy's all the way on the right. Rocky's all the way on the left next to me. I got my hands out talking, of course. John White, Kevin Flanagan, Darrell Summers, Steve Kanyuk, missing one or two.
Darrell's been on the show
is sitting down. Yeah, we're playing with high expansion foam. So my father was a Port Authority cop. And we're out at the airport playing with high expansion foam. It's me, Billy. That's me and Billy. And also the guy shooting the foam was Mark Michaels. He was a paramedic at the time in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
we got the picture here. I'll hang on.
Yeah.
I think
no. So what I was going to say was the first job I had in the medical field was I drove an invalid coach at a Brooklyn Jewish hospital, which also wasn't in a very good neighborhood, right off Eastern Parkway and like Franklin Avenue. And that's where I went every day to take people to their clinic appointments or dialysis, just in a handicap van. And then I got my advanced first aid and CPR, and they made me an ambulance driver, a true ambulance driver. I mean, that's all I was. I wasn't an EMT. I had no real skills. And that's when I went for my EMT course. And as soon as I went for my EMT course, I did the Steve Kerr route, and I went to go see Arnold Pack in Maspeth. And a day later, I'm working. They didn't even give me a shield. They gave me a patch to wear where your shield would be. Just one of those half-moon EMS patches.
Yeah.
And they told me, "Okay, go to Coney Island. Where do you want to go?" I said, "Coney Island." They said, "Go to Coney Island tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I said, "Anybody know I'm coming?" They were like, "No. Just go and tell them you work there."
They will now.
Well, yeah. And I have to tell you, the lieutenant, when I walked in the door, was a guy by the name of Mike Garufi. And he just looked. He was a big guy, big, heavy-set guy. And he looked at me, and he was like, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Mike Granton. I work here." And he goes, "Since when?" I said, "Since like 7 o'clock last night." And he said, "Okay." He said, "I'll tell you what. I'm going to put you with this guy, Artie Stone." He was an old, like 30-year motor vehicle operator. He says, "I'm going to put you with him for today because he knows everything, seeing everything, and does everything. And then when you find somebody you like, you grab him as a partner and stay as long as you want. You can stay for 2, 3, 4 shifts in a row if you want."
Here's a picture, Billy.
That's the one I was talking about. Yes.
Yeah.
So you notice the patch is IESB. So the little Liberty Ambulance and Oxygen Service, a small community ambulance, private ambulance service, they sold to this company in Manhattan, IESB, which had black and yellow ambulances. And again, it was just two knuckleheads. And it was a private ambulance. Did a lot of transfers and take homes and things like that. But that was kind of where we started, like, you know, on the ground. And then I got hired by EMS. I don't even know how it happened. But then, like Steve Kerr told me, I sat down, I was talking to the guy for a half hour, and the next thing I know, he hands me an ID card and says, "You start tomorrow in Coney Island." And boom, I work for EMS.
So what shifts were you working? Were you working days? Were you working nights?
At that time, I was working days. I was working 9 to 5 with Artie Stone in, I think it was 31 Charlie or maybe 31 Boy at the time. I don't know. So here's the other thing. Now, Coney Island Hospital was supposed to, like, scheduled, again, this was right after the 70s. I don't want to keep saying it, but it was right after the 70s layoffs. They were supposed to be running about 14 ambulances. They were supposed to be running at least 2 ALS and 10 or 12 BLS ambulances. But we were lucky we were putting out, because of manpower, we were lucky we were only putting out 4 ambulances a day. So you want to talk about backlogs. I mean, we used to get the calls. People say, "We called you 2 hours ago. Where you been?" And we were like, "We just got the call 10 minutes ago. We drove here like maniacs." And they were like, we called 911 2 hours ago or an hour and a half or what. I mean, that's how bad it was. And, they had that MODAD system, which I thought was fabulous. But the minute you hit that you were available, you hit 98 on that MODAD system, the thing would go, and the dispatch, "Okay, 31 Boy, you're available? Yeah. All right, take this job." And here's my first job, because I know you have somebody in your chat that always asks you. Woman in labor.
Joe Maliga. Yeah.
Woman in labor, McDonald Avenue, cross street like Avenue S. I said, all right, here we go. So Artie Stone's driving, and of course, Artie Stone doesn't get excited about anything. Here I am, a newly minted EMT right out of class. I knew absolutely nothing about delivering a baby. I watched a film. They handed me an OB kit and told me throw it in the bag, and that was my experience, period. Never did a thing with babies. And here I am about to wet myself because I'm going to a baby call, birth is imminent, and I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm trying to read the OB kit on the way to the job. Artie's hysterical laughing in the fancy. "Don't worry, kid. The woman does all the work. Don't worry, kid. Don't worry, kid." We get to the job. It's on a second floor walk up. We go up there. It's an old Italian family. The mother and the older sister are standing in the kitchen like this. The daughter, 15 years old, is laying on the couch with a baby already out between her legs.
Oh my
laying
God.
right there on the couch. And I was like, oh my God. So now I start panicking. I throw the OB kit, and everything's supposed to be in the order that you need it, right? I can't find, the first thing I can't find is the scalpel. So I find the clamps. I clamp off the umbilical cord. I can't find the scalpel, so I use my medic shears. I kiss him to bless him, and then I cut the umbilical cord. And then I grab the baby, hold it up by the feet, and everybody says, hit it. I didn't hit it. I used the bulb suction. I suctioned out the nose and the mouth, and voila, the kid starts crying like crazy. I'm like, oh, thank God. But my heart's probably going faster than the baby's is, and the baby's probably doing like 160. So boom, boom, boom. So now we got the baby crying, the girl's crying, because she's like, I can't let my dad know this happened. I was like, are you kidding me? You just had a baby. She's like, will I be home by 5 o'clock? I was like,
well,
the girl's 15. I'm 19 years old. I'm as clueless. So we get down to the ambulance, and she says to me, listen, I only did it once. I said, well, honey, I'm pretty sure that's all it takes, to have a baby. So, but that was like one of my first calls. I don't know if it was the exact first call, but it was the first memorable call I had. And so there's the baby right away.
right off the rip, man. Right off the rip.
I right out the back. And there was probably over the 4 years of EMS, there was probably like 7 or 8 more. But after you do 1 or 2, you find out, the last one I did with Bobby Ferro, that was the cover of the Daily News. And
yeah, we have that.
Yeah.
We have that.
They have me and Bobby Ferro reversed as far as who's who in the picture. But
there it is.
That one right there. That was right before I left Rescue. So that was January 12th, 93. I left Rescue in February of 93. Mm-hmm. And that's another long story about why I left Rescue. But all we did on that call, me and Bobby, like I was the left stirrup, he was the right stirrup. She's laying on the floor of the train. And the kid in the middle, Richardson, I think his name was, he kind of caught the kid, cut the cord, clamped the umbilical cord. He basically wrapped the baby up. And then we carried the woman upstairs to the hospital, to the ambulance and to the hospital. But I mean, it was just, yeah. Bobby Farrell was so mad at me because I didn't even want to go to this job. We were sitting up on the Upper West Side, actually, no, Midtown on the West Side, almost by the passenger ship terminal when we got that call. And I said, by the time we get to downtown, EMS is going to beat us there, or the fire department. So everybody's going to beat us there, because, of course, Transit also worked with code 1, 2, and 3. So if they didn't give you 3, you couldn't use the siren. So you had to just put the lights on, sit in traffic, sit at red lights, the whole 9 yards. It was kind of horrible, but we got there, and because nobody knew the subway system, we kind of got we were the last ones on the scene, but the first or second ones at the woman having the baby. But of course, right behind us was EMS. So they ended up, we all took part, but the mother does all the work.
That's not a code 3, though?
Oh, no, baby. Absolutely not.
I would think that's crazy to me. You're right.
Absolutely not. All right, so it would be a code 3. So again, I'm pretty sure it was on a weekend. I don't know what day it was, but I'm pretty sure it was on a weekend. If it was during rush hour during the week for the transit authority, they'd make it a code 3 because now you're holding up the train.
Right.
And they were afraid to take the woman off the train.
Right. That's the thing. Right. I remember Kenny explaining that. Yeah.
Right. So nobody wanted to move the person. So of course, but I'm pretty sure it was a weekend. So it was probably 20, 30 minutes before the next train was due in on that track.
All right, so that makes it work. Convenient timing on that end. But, working, and we're talking with Mike Grant, this is volume 52 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Mark Peck, to your point about the PD bar, mentioned this earlier. We can highlight his comment. And again, I'm glad you're watching, Mark. But he does say, hate to say, you're wrong. We had the PD bar, rear bar first, Medic 385. And who did they come to when their install broke? Me.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm sorry, Mark.
Sorry, Mark. He's got a memory like an elephant, and that was a good show.
He does. He does. He's phenomenal. He actually called me. They just had the 50th anniversary of Jacoby's medic training, and he called me, and I was so honored that Mark Peck thought of me, or tried to reach out. A couple of people told me, "Hey, somebody's looking for you on Facebook." I'm not. That's another thing. It's my own fault that I don't keep in touch with anybody. I'm not on any social media. You would think I was in the witness protection program. I'm a very social guy. I don't know if you could tell that in the first 10 minutes of this thing.
I can, and I'm glad you are, because it makes for a great show.
Yeah, well, you can sit there and not say a word. I'll finish the whole thing. But I mean, it's just everybody. No, I'm just saying. I'm trying to go chronologically here, but I got so many freaking stories of nonsense.
The less you talk, the better it is.
All the people you have all the people in the best positions for the longest time. And so I'm never going to out-job. And I think we spoke about this last year when I first contacted you. I am never going to out-job anybody you've had on this program. It's not going to happen. And I think I said to you towards the end of the show, you always say to people, besides the people, what do you miss about the job? Well, the job's been there for 200 years before we ever got there, and the job will be there for another 200 years. It's actually the people you worked with that made the job so memorable and so enjoyable and so much fun. I can't, more times than not, in the 20 years that I worked for, 25 years that I worked for the New York City Police Department, the Transit Police Department, and EMS combined, about 25 years. I can't count on one hand the amount of times I was miserable going to work. I used to go to work and say to whoever I was working with, I can't believe they pay me to do this. I would do this for free. If they said, Mike, tomorrow you can't come in anymore, we're firing you, the city ran out of money, you don't have a job, I would have just went to work anyway. Hey, give me the keys to an ambulance, I'm going. Same thing with being a cop. I mean, for the first 10 years. And some guys, how they do it for 25, 35 years is beyond me.
Yeah, 40 even. Like that guy you mentioned earlier.
But I seriously got burnt out because I think, so when I was doing EMS, I was doing no less than 80-hour weeks. I mean, yes, you only get scheduled 40-hour weeks, but then I stayed, I worked the 9 to 5, then I stayed for the 5 to 1. I'd find somebody who wanted to work. Sometimes it was with another EMT. Sometimes it was with a medic. I kind of learned a lot, you know what I mean? But you couldn't keep me there long enough. I mean, I wanted, but I was 19 years old, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. That's how long, and I was a young kid. I could do it.
You got, let's say you got the adrenaline for it, you got the energy for it. If you have a
Right.
sleepless night, you can get right back up the next day and
I
keep
didn't
going.
need a nap. I didn't need to go home and sit in my recliner. I didn't need to do anything. Just keep me going. I mean, it was all, I love doing this,
Right.
I couldn't believe that at 19, 20 years old, here I am in New York City driving an ambulance, and people calling for help are calling me. And I'm just an idiot from Brooklyn that went through 120-hour EMT course. So I'm serious. You laugh at that, but it's true. I think my mother had more first aid experience than I did. And she used to laugh when I'd come home and tell her stories about what I responded to at night. But then when I became a medic, it got a lot better. So.
And how long was your medic training?
8 months, I think.
Wow. It's like a year and a half now for a lot of guys and girls.
I think it was 8 or 9 months. It started, I believe, in like March, and I went to like October. I don't know. What is that?
That's it's a March to
7,
October.
months.
That's 7 months. Yeah.
7, 8 months. I'm pretty sure. Well, and then you had to go out and be in like field training a little bit.
Yeah, get cleared as a medic and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So
and you had to take the MAC boards or whatever, where they give you scenarios and with doctors and all that.
Get your med control.
It was very intimidating.
I can imagine.
But I loved it. And let me just say this. I discussed this with Mark Peck last year at like, the thing that hurts me the most is medics are not paid what they're worth. And I said to Mark, and he didn't agree with me, but I said, I didn't consider it a livable wage. So when I was the whole time I was with EMS, I lived at home. So I really didn't need to provide for myself. I actually, believe it or not, I'm a real mama's boy. I'd go home, I'd hand my mother the check that I got. And then if I needed $20 for the week to buy lunch or whatever, she would hand me $20. Was it coming out of my money or her money? I didn't know. I didn't really care. Here's my check, Ma, And whenever I needed money, she'd give me money. And my father got pissed because by the time I got out of EMS, actually I was getting married in 84. And my mother said, here, Michael, here's your bank book. And it had like $17,000 in it because I had no expenses. But $17,000, I was only making like $14,400 a year with EMS as a paramedic. And I said, that's crazy, man. Cops are making 23 to start, and after 3 years going to 36. Plus they get uniform allowance, night shift differential, overtime. They got all kinds of perks and bennies. And we didn't get any of that. And here we are, like I said, going to the same calls, going to the same areas. And I still think EMS, even today, is poorly paid. I think they need to be double their salaries tomorrow wouldn't be enough.
The medics, and it's different. And I agree with you. And Donna Weaver, I misunderstood your question. I get you now. I'll highlight it momentarily. But Connecticut's a little bit different because, again, the medics, at least in the fire service, and this is why a lot of these medics try to go the fire route, the pay is great in the fire service. If you have your medic, you're basically a walk-on to a fire department. It's not a matter of if you're going to interview. It's a matter of when. New York City is a little bit of a different animal, although the FDNY is leaning more towards EMS in the future. But, you got guys, if medics aren't getting paid what they should be getting paid out in the field in New York City for the different hospitals they work for, and they're basically being asked to be field doctors, imagine what the EMTs are making. And that's why I say, sad to say it, still to this day, rather be New York Presbyterian, Lenox Hill, or the issues that FDNY EMS has, bastard stepchildren. Shouldn't be that way, especially with what you're asking them to do and what they do day in and day out, year in and year out.
And the training they go through. Now, I've gone through the cop training. I've gone through the EMS training.
Yep.
I've even gone through the ESU training. But I have to tell you, the medic training was the most demanding and also the most rewarding training I ever had in my life.
Yeah, because that's that. And again, the training and also the street is where you get a heck of an education. And in line with that, Donna's question was, what program did you go through to get your medic?
I went through Jacoby at Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx.
Okay.
That was the only one at the time. I think when I was going through, Bellevue 1 was going through. Bellevue 1 finally started a medic program. Some people went to St. Vincent's. I think Mark may have went to St. Vincent's. I'm not sure.
Yeah, refresh my memory, Mark.
It wasn't like an organized paramedic program, though. It was a doctor who said, hey, if we can get the guys in the ambulance to do some of these skills, we can save a lot more lives.
Yeah.
So they taught them, intubation and defibrillation. Again, Mark Peck will speak on this better than I would. He was there way before me. But, we used to call Mark Peck, I don't know if they called it to his face. We used to call him number one because we always thought Mark Peck was the first paramedic in New York City. So whenever I talk about Mark Peck, I call Mark Peck number one to people in the field.
He was Jacoby too. He sang in 1977.
There you go.
So he was one of the first, that's for sure. Now, I was going to say, I mean, again, in most cops these days, well, if you're an emergency service, you have EMT training, so they train everybody to be EMTs. And of course, it helps if you were a medic prior. There's a lot of guys who were medics prior to get onto the PD, and they ended up in ESU, even better. But back then, I mean, you were happy in New York City EMS. You were doing a lot in New York City EMS. But did you always have ambitions to eventually try for the PD, or was that something that came to you as you were in it? Okay, there you go. So how did it come about?
Well, I still wanted to be a pilot, and I'll tell you how it came about. I wanted to be a New York City fireman. I'm sorry to say it.
No, listen, I love how much I love. Yeah,
the cops and firemen are always butting heads, but I always wanted to be a New York City fireman. Mm-hmm. Or if I had my choice, remember I said we had a summer house out in Rocky Point, mm-hmm. or be a Suffolk County cop, and when I was off duty, be a volunteer fireman in Long Island, because they don't have paid departments. They had volunteer, but they had just as nice, if not nicer, equipment than the people in the city.
Oh, those guys do very well.
They didn't have the volume. But they had beautiful equipment. As a kid, I used to just love going to the firehouse, look at fire trucks, climb all over the fire trucks and everything. Nobody ever said no, So I wanted to be a fireman, to be honest with you. Why am I not a fireman? Why did I never go to the fire department? Because I smoked like a fiend. So at 13 years old, well, when I was born, my whole family smoked. Again, I'm the youngest of 5 kids. So by the time they all became teenagers, all my older brothers, 2 other sisters, 2 older brothers, they all smoked. My parents smoked, both of them. My grandfather sat in his chair with a giant cigar burning, I think his whole life, the whole 25 years I was on this earth, that he was on this earth. He had a giant cast iron cigar stand with a glass ashtray I couldn't even pick up until I was like 21 years old. That's how heavy it was. But I mean, everybody smoked. So by the time I was 13 years old, I started buying my own cigarettes. And I had a cousin, Frank Naglieri. I don't know if you had him on your show, but I had a cousin.
I know that name.
Yeah, Frank Naglieri. So there was 2 Frank Naglieris on the fire department. So his father was the chauffeur for the 4-2 battalion in Bensonhurst. And when I was a kid, all I kept saying to my parents was, if I wasn't going to be a pilot, I was going to be a fireman. So they called my mother's cousin, Frank Naglieri, or I think his wife was my mother's cousin, May. And he came to my house one Saturday morning in the pouring rain in a Chiefs car. It was a station wagon with the bell on the front and one spinning dome and the pulsar siren. And he showed up to my house in the pouring rain and said, hey, Dot, send Michael out. We're going to take it for a ride around the block in the Chiefs car. I couldn't stop talking about it for 10 years. But again, when it came time for me, so Frank Jr., his son, in good shape, buff, like swim his body and all that stuff, he comes to my house, bangs on the door and says, Mike, come on, I'm starting to run and work out so that we can beat the physical for the fire department. I was like, yeah, let's do it. He starts running. I get about 4 blocks before I'm like this. And he ain't even breathing. He don't even have his mouth open. He's breathing through his nose like and I'm like, I can't, I don't want to hold you back. You go do your thing. I'll work on quitting smoking. And it took me till January 2nd, 2017 to quit smoking, by the way.
Oh, glad you did.
I quit drinking, no problem. I just couldn't, not that drinking was ever a problem, but drinking and smoking go together.
Right.
So, but it took me forever. Smoking was killing me. Smoking killed half my family, killed my mother, killed my sister, killed everybody. So, killed my uncle. Mm. So I just, thank God I finally quit smoking. My oldest brother's still smoking. He's 72, still living in Staten Island. And all I do is go up there and say to him, lose weight, quit smoking.
Yeah.
I said, you're not a doctor if you don't say that to somebody who smokes. You know what I mean?
No, listen, it's like they don't call it a cancer stick for nothing. There's no good that comes out of it.
Well, but again, everybody smoked in the 40s and 50s. Not that I'm that old, but, come 63, 64, the Surgeon General came out and said smoking causes low birth weight babies, causes emphysema. And, they were required to write that on the side of the pack of cigarettes. As soon as my father heard that, my father wasn't a medical guy. He was just, a cop, a flatfoot type guy. He took the 2 packs of cigarettes out of his pocket, threw them in the garbage. Paul Moles. My uncle upstairs smoked Lucky Strikes. But anyway, threw them in the garbage, and he was done. Never smoked again. I didn't have that kind of constitution, to be honest with you.
Cold turkey like that.
I tried to quit smoking 600 times in the 40 years it took me to do it.
Yeah. Well,
I got hypnotized. I took the pills. I got the patches. I got shot in the ear with some ray gun and everything they did to quit smoking. I took Wellbutrin. I had patches all over my body. I tried everything, and I just couldn't quit smoking. But that's why I'm not in the New York City Fire Department, because as we all know, their physical was much more tougher than the New York City Police Department.
Yeah, I mean, especially at that time. Although there's a great story, and I don't know if he was a smoker or not. But back then, guys, SCBA was just a concept, or a mask rather, was just a concept in fires. It wasn't mandatory. Ray Downey, the great chief of Special Operations Command, who gave his life on 9/11, he'd be down a hallway. Guys are choking, trying to get their mask on. This is later on. And he's shouting and talking normally above the smoke as if it's nothing, breathing it in. And that's why they call them smoke eaters. Not so much now. There's a lot of protection now, a lot of awareness now. Back then, guys would put an air pack on their back and just go straight in and then have a cigar after.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I know a couple of guys that got thrown out of some specialized units for not wearing the mask. So they would actually make almost like scuba mouthpieces out of the mask. Mm-hmm. Not have to put the mask on and still go in, but they'd come out with their eyes and their nose
covered. Yeah, you see, and it looks iconic, but it's not good for your health. It looks very cool, I will say, but you'd rather not deal with the long-term aspect of it. And Bobby, I don't know his last name, but he was a sergeant in Transit Rescue. I think he went over to ESU with the merger. Bobby G-Man, we're friends on Facebook.
Bobby Gagan?
What was that?
Bobby Gagan?
I might be. I think so. Yeah, at least as looking good, Mike. One of the funniest guys in EMRU. Great rescue man. Yeah, he was. I believe he was a sergeant in Transit Rescue. And
Bob Gagan was the cat's pajamas.
Well, there you go. And he's a big Yankee fan, I believe. We're thinking of the same guy.
He used to set up all the Yankee. Last Yankee game I ever went to, Bobby Gagan set it up, and it was 1994. And then they went on strike, and I refused to go ever again. So I haven't been to a professional baseball game since 1994.
So that is the same guy then, because there's and he has it on his Facebook. It's a picture of at the old Yankee Stadium up on the board where they would give shout outs. There's a shout out to all the EMRU guys.
Yes. It was fabulous.
Yeah. All right.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, I'd love to get Bobby on the show. I know he's a little shy, but Bobby, if you ever want to come on the show, I think he'd be a great guest because I truly love to have you. So getting on, into transit at the time. And I know it gets talked about a lot, but transit, we talk about the 3 police departments. Transit, I felt, was also the bastard stepchild because of the fact that you were underground. The radios didn't work. But again, much like EMS, it forced you to think on your feet. It forced you to really have to rely on a lot of your natural instincts in addition with the training you were receiving. Because listen, is it good to have the radio? Is it good to have backup? Absolutely it is, especially if you get into dicey situations. But sometimes a cop's greatest weapon is his mind. It's not necessarily his gun. It's not anything on his tool belt, although that's important too. It's his mind and how he can process a situation. So much like it was in education, working EMS, working with different EMS partners, EMT and medic alike, I imagine with whatever assignment you got out of the academy, once you got transit, it's the same thing. Learning how to understand people, learning it's not the street, but learning how to work underground where there's so many odds stacked against you.
Yes, and elevated subways also. So I have to tell you about transit. So transit, I took 0255, which was given in late 1980. Mm-hmm. It was a strictly transit test. And I did very well on it that they called me almost right away. They called me in early 1981 for transit. And I have to tell you, I just started with EMS. Again, I was going to work saying, wow, I can't believe they pay me to do this. Look how fabulous it is. I'm driving a New York City ambulance. So I was working out of Coney Island Hospital. So I went to the transit district, which was 34 in Coney Island, and as an EMT. And I walked in the door and I met a guy named Jerry Jenkins and I think Bob Rice. But I said, hey, I just got called for this job. Should I take it? And they were like, what are you, out of your mind, kid? This job sucks. Blah, blah. Stay where you are. That's the job of the future. Before you know it, you'll be making more than us. So I said, okay, thanks for the info. And I walked out, got back in the ambulance, and I was like very happy. I went to jobs all for the next 12 hours, job after job. So I didn't take transit, but I did take 1175. There was one after 1175 and 1010, 1175, and 4061. 3 more. But that was when they started with the tri-agency list.
Yeah, and Tri-Agency Academy.
Yes, if you got the top of the list, you went to housing.
Mm-hmm.
If you got the middle of the list, the middle third or whatever, you went to transit. And then the rest of the list goes to NYPD. Or at least, again, I was never an applicant investigation. I don't know if they do that to stroke your ego, to try and get you to take transit or housing. But that's what they were telling me. And I kept saying, I don't want transit and housing. I want to be NYPD or nothing. And they were like, you don't have that choice anymore, kid. You're going to transit. And then the second test, I was going to housing. I said, I don't want to go to housing. So they said, then we're going to defer you again. So the third test, I got called for transit again. So I was like, man. So I said, well, if I'm going to go to transit, my original test, 0255, it still had like 6 months left that it was certified. And I actually took appointment off 0255 so that I'd have more seniority than people that came off the other ones.
Smart.
Yeah. Well, out of my academy class.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. And I have to tell you, it was funny because when I get hired by transit, Chris Ellison, who was a paramedic at Coney Island Hospital, did the same thing. He deferred for almost 4 years the transit appointment, and he took the same test, 0255. I think he did maybe even better than me, a few points better than me. And he also got hired at the same exact time as me after deferring for 4 years because it was the last chance if you were on that list to get hired. So we got hired January of '85. We got hired by the Transit Police.
And where did you work? Sorry, go ahead.
Go to the regular academy.
Yeah.
And then when you get out, you go through like 3 weeks of the Transit Academy. And then they put you in a field training program, which was only for like 2 weeks, but you get assigned to a cop. There were like 5. There was a big class. I don't know how many, over $2,000, 2,000 candidates. Transit had 400 or 500 guys in that, 400 guys in that class, I believe, out of the 2,000 guys going through the city academy. So 400 people were transit cops. They assign you to like a field training officer who's just a guy going out on his post. Don't want to be a field training officer. Don't want 5 kids following him around. Don't want to teach anybody anything. So they sent me to Union Square, and then they sent me for training to Coney Island, to 34, which is where my dream sheet I wanted to work. I'm sorry. Yeah, 34. So I trained for 2 weeks at 34, learned all the posts, all the stations, all the train runs, all the whatevers. I'm very comfortable with the area. I grew up there in basically South Brooklyn. And the day we're going to go out on our own, you get 2 days off, and then when you come back, you're going out on your own. I get notified by the desk officer I was just transferred to District 33. And I said, District 33, where the hell is that? And they were like, oh, that's in East New York. That's Fulton and Van Sinderen. Like, Fulton and Van Sinderen. So, and I knew the area because of Billy Gross in the Camaro buffing fires. So I was like, Fulton and Van Sinderen, holy smokes. So now I get there. There's so many guys there, and they're in a tiny, what used to be like a transit maintenance facility. So you have no lockers. You have to basically work out of the trunk of your car. They have roll call outside because the muster room isn't big enough for the amount of new cops they have, plus the old cops. And Frank O'Hare was given the roll call. And again, right away, I rubbed him the wrong way because when roll call was over, he said, anybody have any questions? And I raised my hand, and he said, yeah, what do you want, Officer Granton? And I said, where's the subway? And that's exactly, he thought I was being a wise ass. He was like, oh, here's another wise ass. I said, listen, sir, with all due respect, I just did 2 weeks of training in Coney Island. I got all the lines down, the stations down. I said, they sent me here today. It's the first day we're going out alone. I got no training here. And he goes, follow the crowd. They'll show you where the subway is. I had no idea where I was going, what I was doing. I didn't know where the A was, the J was, the M train. I had no idea. So there I was. And that's how I got thrown into transit.
And that was a dangerous time to be a police officer because you have to keep in mind, too, when you got there in 85, this is right after Irma Lozada got killed. And her anniversary just passed. So it's,
Lozada. And it's during the big drug trade, 2,000 murders a year in New York City. And again, I'm going to say it again, because to this day, it really, I wonder where common sense went. Because 2,000 murders a year in New York City, and not one person besides a police officer can carry a gun in New York City. All the criminals have guns. All the thieves have guns. All the robbers have guns, and all the drug addicts have guns.
Yeah.
And the mayor of the city of New York right now was a former transit cop who I stood next to at some jobs. And let me tell you something. I can't believe like he's not saying, okay, let's let everybody. The Supreme Court already ruled New York City's permitting system unconstitutional. So they should be able to let anybody who lives in New York City want to buy a gun, buy a gun. Honest, hardworking, good people. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what socioeconomic background you come from. Anybody who can carry a gun should be carrying a gun. But no, we don't. They're still fighting them tooth and nail. And we're still having, I don't know how many murders were there in New York last year. I have no idea.
400, 500 something, which is because the lowest that it ever got.
Right.
And listen, we know one is too many. These people aren't just numbers. They were people. So we're not saying that.
Right.
But the lowest it ever got from 2,700 plus in 1990 was 289 as recently as 2018, which is remarkable when you think about it. It's almost it's a crazy drop. I'm not a mathematician, so I couldn't tell you the exact percentage. But nevertheless, too, I mean, back then, you also got to understand, too, and I know you do, but generally I speak to the audience. The little crimes. Bill Bratton had the broken windows model, which he brought to transit, which we'll talk about in a little bit, which dropped transit crime 27% at the time, where if you enforce the little things, usually the guy that jumps the turnstile, listen, sometimes it is just a young kid that's being an idiot. You pull him to the side, hey, don't do that. Come on, pay the fare. And they got nothing else going on. They're just being a dumb kid. But a lot of the other times, it's somebody jumping the turnstile who probably committed a homicide, probably has a warrant out for something else. And if you enforce the little things, it usually takes down the guys who are wanted or are going to do bigger things before they can actually do it.
Worked like a charm.
It worked like a charm. It's one of the best models, if not the best model in policing that's ever invented. So before I get to EMRU, anything notable that sticks out from those 2 years working patrol in terms of jobs, collars?
All right. Yes. Yes. And by the way, I sent you this picture of Bill Bratton.
Yeah, we got it. I wonder who he was talking to in that.
Any transit cop that was on patrol when Bratton came there will tell you you'd go to hell and back for Bill Bratton because of all the stuff you just said.
Right.
I mean, why did the transit regime before Bill Bratton realize this? You know what I mean? We were kind of working for people who didn't seem to want to have policing done. They
Bastard
just didn't want
stepchildren
anything to happen. They wanted like everybody to be good people on the trains, and that's just never going to happen.
Right.
Okay. So the most notable thing, I sent you this picture too, but
yes,
it was the only picture I could find of Bob Ganley because I don't really hang with him. But Bob Ganley was an anti-crime cop in District 23, which was out in the Rockaways. We used to call it the drinking man's command. So if you like to drink, you wanted to go to District 23, which was out in the Rockaways. So, but District 33, when you rode the trains, you had to ride a train out to the Rockaways. It was called the Round Robin. The A train, every third train or whatever, went all the way out to the Rockaways, went all the way to Mott Avenue and Far Rockaway, and then came right back up past JFK and back to like Lefferts Boulevard out that way. And then the A line through Brooklyn. So I'm on a train run, which again, stupid me. I get assigned. I've never had any training in this command, right? I write down the train run. And I write down the train run that I go from J Street, which is the headquarters of the Transit Police. And then I take it all the way back to 121st Street and then back to J Street. And it gives you the schedule of when the train's going to run. The problem is the 121st Street was only for the first trip. Because if you took it all the way to Lefferts Boulevard, the train you were supposed to be on was already left Lefferts Boulevard and would be at 121st Street. That's why you got off the first time. But I made the whole run. I never knew there was a Lefferts Boulevard because I made the whole run from J Street to 121st Street. So I just kept getting off the train at 121st Street, crossing over to the other side and waiting for my train to come back. Little did I know it went 2 more stops, and the last stop was actually Lefferts Boulevard. So when I finally find this out, actually 121st Street, I saw a shoe fly looking for me. He didn't see me, but I saw him because I was smoking. And you're not supposed to smoke in uniform. But it's the only time you have a chance to smoke. So I got out of the subway. I went to the mezzanine. I smoked. I sucked down a cigarette as fast as I could. And then he came down and went up my side, and I went up his side. I went up the other side to take the train out of there. And then when he saw me 2 hours later, he said, "What were you doing here before?" And I said, "I was just doing my train run." And he goes, "Your train run don't stop here." I said, "Yes, it does. And look, 121st Street." He goes, "No, it goes to Lefferts Boulevard." So the first time I go to Lefferts Boulevard, it's at, the end of the line. I get off the train, and I'm at the wrong end, of course. So I got to walk the whole length of the platform to get downstairs to the street to go smoke my cigarette. I walk past the rear car of the train. There's 3 kids spray painting the train, doing the whole graffiti thing. So now I grab the 3 of them. What the heck are you doing? You don't see? Look at the size of me. I mean, I'm in uniform. You guys, you should have ran before I got it. I mean, I'm standing right next to them. They're still spray paint.
Nobody said they were smart.
Exactly. If they were smart, we'd never catch any of them.
Exactly.
So,
job security.
I locked the 3 of them up and I called for a car. So here I am thinking, the deadheads from District 33 were going to show up. And who shows up? District 23. Now, you want to talk about cars in shitty condition. I'm sorry. In
that's fine.
Condition. No. But so they show up in a Suburban. There's like no back seat. I got 3 perps. The 2 guys that are in the car, one guy's a little skinny thing, Speed, I think his name was. The other guy was gigantic. And I said, all right, I'm putting up, where am I going? They go, you go in the back with the spare tire and the jumper cables. And I was like, it's all dirty and greasy back there. Well, that's where you go. Otherwise, you're going to take the train to the command. We'll see you in 2 hours. So I was like, and I didn't know they were in 23. So I was in 23. The last 2 stops were actually District 23, not District 33. So I ended up going all the way to Far Rockaway to book these kids. First time I ever had a DAT or even a juvenile arrest. So I walk in, probably looking like death warmed over, and Bob Ganley is in plain clothes, and he says, what do you got, kid? And I said, I got 3 for graffiti. He goes, oh, you ever done it before? I said, no, because you can tell everything's brand new. He says, I said, no, I've never done it before. I'll probably be here for 2 weeks. And he goes, no, let me help you out. And meanwhile, his friends were waiting for him to go drink some beers. So this guy, like a crack whore, I mean, he picks up the phone, one numbers, he's getting all pedigrees. He's going, just get all their name, address, and you start filling out these forms with all their name, address, and height, weight, and all that nonsense. I'll print them later, blah, blah, blah. But, I got 3 folders. I'm filling out all the paperwork as fast as I can, and he's still running circles around me, pulling open file cabinets, doing whatever. I mean, in an hour, I had all 3 kids processed, had their parents called. They were coming to pick them up and all this other crap. And I was like, wow, I don't even know what happened, but I just got credit for 3 arrests. And he did all the work. I still was no closer to knowing. And then he was like, all right, I'm off to the bar or whatever. And out the door he ran. So I told that story a lot because in transit, we had a little website or whatever where they used to say, hey, we're losing people left and right. Why don't anybody tell a good story about somebody before we all leave? Everybody waits till somebody dies and says, oh, Mike Colón was such a nice guy. And, I loved working with him. And, he did this, that, and the other thing. Everybody said, how about we start doing things like that for the living? Not for the dead?
Yeah, I like that.
I told my Bob Ganley story. And everybody was like, wow, that's a fabulous story. Why don't you tell us who you are? I was like, Mike Granton, and what do you want me to tell you? Right. Yeah. So anyway, Bob Ganley was my hero in the Transit Police, besides Bill Bratton.
I imagine him pulling up to the bar that night. Guys, you aren't going to believe what just happened.
Well, no, quite the story. For him, it was an old hat. I mean, he was probably only on 2 or 3 years more than me. He probably came on in the 81 class.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, they went through Harlem U. They went up at 161st or 180th.
Oh, that's where their academy was? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
They did run their own. Housing used to run their own.
Right. And they ran their own academy again in 93 when Bratton took over. Yeah.
And Bratton got there in 90. I'll get to EMRU now, but before I move on, because today is his anniversary, did you know Bobby Venable at all?
Bobby Venable. I was working that night, too, but I was in Coney Island, not in East New York. Yeah. And I was driving a bus, and he didn't want to go. I mean, trust me, I was driving like a maniac.
Right.
He was like, what are you doing? I was like, we're going to East New York. He was like, no, we're not. And I mean,
Yeah.
He had 15, 17 years on. I had a year and a half. And
you had to listen to him.
Yeah, I had to. I mean, what am I going to do? Insubordination with a year and a half on the job? That's kind of like a career killer right there.
Right, there's Bobby. Yeah, Bobby was confronting. He had gotten flagged down because at that
Yep.
moment they didn't care what patch Bobby was wearing. They needed a cop. They didn't care if he was
Right.
transit, housing, or NYPD. But he got flagged out by some people saying, "Hey, there's some heavily armed individuals down this way. Do you mind going to investigate?" I think they were transporting a van of prisoners
Yes, they
when
sure
they
were.
went to do that, and so
Yeah.
that's what ended up, unfortunately, resulting in Bobby confronting some heavily armed guys. A shootout ensued, and Bobby was hit in the head, and he died at the hospital. So they just had his ceremony today. I just wanted to ask about him. I'd be remiss if I didn't on this anniversary of his murder, but he, listen, his memory is not forgotten. So 1987, EMRU's been around 10 years by this point. Joe said, and Dean Esserman, who ended up being chief of police in my hometown of New Haven, Connecticut, as I mentioned before in the program, was a college student at the time, I think at Dartmouth. And so he said, listen, if there's a major emergency down here, kind of like we talked about, somebody unfortunately gets raped on the subway, somebody gets assaulted, somebody gets robbed, or somebody's having a baby, you need if you're going to have a transit police, you're going to need a rapid response team equipped to handle these specialized incidents, space cases, somebody going under the train, so on and so forth, because it's going to be a while with the traffic before FD gets there. It's going to be a while with the traffic again before NYPD emergency service gets there. So they couldn't call it ESU at the time. They had to name it something else for political reasons. They did. But here you are a few years into it. EMRU comes around. It helps that you're a medic. How'd the opportunity to go to EMRU come about?
Okay, so another wacky story. Oh, can I just say one more thing about my EMS time?
Go ahead.
Victor, I think you got this one too. By the way, I married my partner in EMS. She was a medic also. And I wouldn't have got through medic school without her because you have to know a couple of algebraic equations to do drip rates and things like that. And I was terrible at algebra. And she tutored me all through medic school with the math. So, but I married my partner. There she is. Yes. Fabulous. Arlene Egan. Anybody in EMS in that time would know her also. But yeah. So we had 2 kids, and but it just didn't work out. 16 years later, it was kaput. So sorry about that. But anyway.
All right.
Yeah, so I show up. So what happens is, so now EMRU at the time, I think only had about 16 or 20 guys in it. And because of the big influx of cops, putting in 2,000 to 4,000, well, actually, transit wasn't as much. But each class in the city academy had about 2,000 people in it, or 2,500 people in it. And of course, transit was getting about 400 or 500 out of each of those classes. So now the transit academy, the transit police was growing just as fast, conditionally, just as fast as the NYPD. Yeah. And they decided they were going to double the size of the rescue unit. So I go into work one day, and there's a big position vacancy notice on the wall, and it says, if you would like to be in the transit police rescue unit, by all means, here's the prerequisites, and then submit this form, and you'll be considered. So the first prerequisite was minimum of 3 years on the job. I had 2 years and 2 months at the time. So I said, oh, there you go. I don't qualify. Then it went into any kind of specialty medical training and blah, blah, blah. But the first prerequisite was 3 years on the job. So I never filled out the form because I didn't have 3 years on the job. I figured there's no way they were even going to look at me. So come 3 months later, when they finally picked the 16 or 18 guys they were putting in EMRU, I'm going down the list. Now, again, my class was small enough. It was under 400 people transit-wise. That you can go by tax number. I'm looking at all the names. They were all out of my class. Most of them were out of my class. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. Vinny Brindisi sat next to me in the police academy. How is he EMRU? And this kid, this guy was in the all these.
Something ain't right here.
Something's not right here. So I start kicking cans, and I'm all PO'd. And my bosses, Joe Lacaraza and Bob Rice, they were all like, hey, Mike's never. Remember I told you less than 5 times, less than one hand's worth of fingers when I was miserable going to work, right? So now I'm kicking cans. I'm all pissed off. And everybody's coming to me. What's the matter? What happened? What's the matter? I said, you see the list for rescue? And they were like, yeah. I said, I went to the academy with all those guys. None of them have 3 years on the job. I didn't have 3 years. I didn't apply. I said, but I don't have the hook. I don't have the rabbi. I don't know the right people. So they were like, wow, no, get out of here. Now, Bob Rice knew me because I was a midnight medic out of Coney Island, which I left a lot of people out there, too. I'm kind of disappointed. But I was a midnight medic out of Coney Island, and we used to run into the transit guys. What was the only place open 24 hours in Brooklyn in 1980? Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts. So
America runs on Dunkin'.
In the 6-8, we would meet the transit cops. We would meet the housing cops. As a matter of fact, I play pickleball now. I'm playing with a housing lieutenant. And I said to him, the only housing cops I knew, because they were steady midnights in Coney Island, Georgia Stone and Jerry Cooney or something. And he goes, Georgia Stone, I was the best man at his wedding. I got him right here on my cell phone. And the guy's like, I was like, no way. And that's how small the whole operation was.
Oh, my God.
But the same thing, I get to Coney Island, and the sergeant looks at me and goes, where do I know you from? I said, 10th Division Paramedics on the air. And he goes, oh, my God, yes. So, I used to see them every night. Mike Spinelli, too. He was a regular RMP operator on midnights. And then when he, again, transit started growing, he became a sergeant and then a lieutenant. I don't know how high he went, because then I lost track of him. But, because I went into EMRU. But anyway, I started kicking cans and all pissed off that I didn't have a hook to get into EMRU, and I didn't have 3 years on the job. And I have to tell you, Joe LaCarrazza, I believe, called Frank Kelly, who was Joe Said's paisan. Frank Kelly and Joe Said ran the rescue unit. Mm-hmm. And LaCarrazza called him up and said, hey, Frank, you missed a good guy here for rescue. He was a paramedic in Coney Island Hospital. He this, that, and the other thing. So Frank says, tell him to keep his nose clean. I'll come by and talk to him in a couple of days. And that's the way Frank told him. He was like whispered everything. So sure enough, Frank Kelly shows up like 3 or 4 nights later, and we go into the captain's office. I don't think I ever said a word. Joe LaCarrazza said, this guy's great. He knows the area. You don't even have to tell him where to go. He's like the back of his hand. Bada bing, bada bang. He can drive. He's a good cop. You don't have a lot of complaints, So the next, Frank goes, all right, keep your nose clean. The next class, you have to backfill because some of these kids are going to fail out. We'll put you in. So I said, okay, great. So I was in the backfill class, which is like 4 guys. Victor, you got that picture too. 4 guys in chief of department, I believe. Did you get that one?
Oh, yeah.
Me, Franco Baraducci, Irv Stallings, and Louis Vega.
See if we got
that one. All 4 in dress uniform.
Yeah, we can get it. Don't worry. I'll get it.
Shaking hands with the chief, kissing babies, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, that was the backfill class for the big class that went in. So I went in like November of 87. Mm-hmm. But in the interim, I responded to it. Like I said, I responded to a job on the R line, 59th Street and 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. Again, driving the boss. We had an unconscious on the platform. When we get there, the guy's dead. But little did we know, we didn't know rescue was coming. So all of a sudden, here comes rescue down the stairs. And who comes down the stairs but Jeff Dito?
I know Jeff.
Who looks like Al Pacino, by the way.
Yeah.
And Tony Romano. And now I haven't seen Tony Romano in 15 years. When I last saw Tony Romano, he was a little skinny, redheaded kid from Brooklyn. Yeah. This guy that comes down the stairs is like 6'2", 6'3". He's built like a brick shit house. His legs are as big as his arms are as big as my legs. And I'm like, oh. So I go over to Jeff Dito and I said, hey, they call your partner Red? He says, no, they call him Rocky. I said, why do they call him Rocky? He says, because he's fast with his hands. I said, really? Let's see how fast. So I go over and I put my book away because I was writing all the information for the deceased guy. I put my book away and I walk behind Rocky. He's a big, big guy. So I grab him around the neck and I throw him over my hip like a judo throw. And as I'm going down, he pulls me down with him and my name tag is cutting into the back of his hand. And he goes, Granton, are you Mike Granton? I was like, yeah, you big jerk. And now we're hugging and rolling around on a platform. The sergeant's like, what are you doing? There's a dead body here. And we're like, yeah. So what do you want me to tell you? It ain't going to annoy him. So anyway, so Rocky said to me, I thought you were a paramedic. I said, I was, but I came to the transit police. He goes, you got to get in the rescue unit. I said, I will as soon as I can. But so I eventually got her.
Yeah, I'm sorry you don't have the picture. I don't think it came through. I looked in the email earlier. I don't think it came through.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, whoever. Yeah, I thought I sent it. I don't know.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'm a computer illiterate, but
that's fine. It's fine. And that was.
Hold on, let me just look real quick because I could have swore I sent it to you.
That was a great time to be in rescue. Let me just say hi to everybody else in the chat that's tuning in. Again, thanks, Joe Maliga. Chris Ebden's here, and I know you went through the housing rescue training a while ago, so good to see all you tuning in tonight. Don't forget, if you have a question, fire it away. Some of you already have, but if you got more, don't be shy. But that was a heck of a time to be in rescue because there was a lot that you could do citywide. It was one of the few citywide units the Transit Police had. And I'll never forget something that Charlie Caperna said, not on this show, but in the episode of Cops that Transit Police was featured for. He's riding around, Kenny Schnetzler is driving him. He's like, that thick New York accent is, I got 4 trucks for essentially operating for 4 boroughs. Sometimes 5 or 6 trucks operating for 4 of the 5 boroughs, with the exception of Staten Island, answering jobs citywide. And those are only 2 guys per, because again, you guys didn't have to have your rescue truck like NYPD, ESU did. It's 2 guys per truck. We're talking what, 8 usually, and if it's 5 or 6, 10 or 12, not a lot of guys for that unit. But again, handled a whole hell of a lot on the shift and handled it well.
Yes, and I have to tell you, we did cover a huge area, and I have to. 4 trucks was a lot of trucks for us to turn out.
Yeah,
most times if we had enough manpower for 4 trucks, we didn't have 4 running trucks. And that was another thing. So I sent you a picture of right before we were about to meet. You showed it earlier. But right before we were about to meet Bill Bratton for the first time. And Mike O'Connor was the chief of the Transit Police. And he said, none of you guys better say anything bad about about the state of the vehicles. We don't have a vehicle on the road with over 50,000 miles on it. And I looked at him, I said, Chief, we drove here in a truck with 90,000 miles on it. The thing's a bucket of bolts. It's about to fall apart. He said, what did I just tell you? I said, oh, so you want me to lie to the new chief, the incoming chief of the department? You want me to lie to what? Make you look good? Or to make you look like you're doing your job? So he wanted to throw me out of rescue because I wouldn't go with the program. And I didn't go with the program. I have to tell you, when Bratton asked, I told him that we have buckets of bolts.
Yeah, and there's a video. Do you see? Have you seen the video on YouTube where Bratton's introducing the new fleet and whatnot?
Yes. Yeah. We had to watch that. That was another. He instituted. We had to watch that at roll call. We had to watch that at muster when he did that. And those were Chief's videos. That was actually part of roll call. All right, the chief put out a new video. Jimmy O'Neill, the guy who eventually became police commissioner.
I had Jimmy on the show a while ago.
All right, so Jimmy O'Neill was the sergeant, newly promoted sergeant, and he was put in charge of the video unit. And Bratton loved that. Bratton was the one who used him for everything. And any message he wanted to get out to the troops, he didn't wait for it to go through the chain of command and down to the rank and file, because it's like the telephone game. If you've ever played the telephone game with Victor there, you would know that, when you say something, by the time it gets to Victor and then back to you, it's not the same message.
It's not the same. Information gets distorted.
So the chief said, all right, so Jimmy's going to do a video of me, and we're going to send it to every command, and you're going to watch it at every roll call. And that's exactly what happened. And that's how those videos came to be. And, Jimmy O'Neill, the only mistake he made, as far as I was concerned, was firing the chokehold cop.
Panaleo. Yeah, Panaleo. That was that's a sore subject for a lot of guys who were working back then.
I can't even talk about it.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, we won't get into it.
I'll tell you, but my nephew, I was off the job already, so I really can't say anything. But my nephew was on the job, and he said, hey, I'm going to the community breakfast for the Sacred Heart. He said, and the police commissioner is going to be there. So I said, oh, go over and introduce yourself. His name's John Granton. It's my brother's name. It's his son. And I said, go and introduce yourself to the police commission. He goes, I don't want to do that. I said, no. Go introduce yourself. So he went to the community breakfast, and he met the police commissioner, and he said, hey, my uncle said you gave him a knot on his forehead with a hockey puck. And he goes, who's your uncle? And he goes, Mike Granton. He goes, tell Mike Granton he almost put me through the boards that I'm still feeling, whatever, like sore ribs or whatever from his body check. So
big Ranger fan, too.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Diehard Ranger fan.
We played on the transit hockey. I played with Dave DeQuarez, too. Vinny Brindisi. That was another good group of guys, though. And I was an ankle bender. I was kind of like I taught myself to skate just to go play hockey and be a Neanderthal.
Listen, there's guys that make a whole career out of the pucks. I'm not a Devils fan. I'm a diehard Ranger fan myself. But if you look at guys like take Jeff Bukaboom, right? He was that way. Take on the Devils side. Scotty Stevens was that way. Ken Danico was that way. You can count the amount of goals that Ken Danico. He was a great analyst on MSG for the Devils. You can count the amount of goals Ken Danico scored in his career on one hand. But you know what? There wasn't a better stay-at-home defenseman on that second line for those Devils Stanley Cup teams.
Right. Yeah. And not as much hockey skill, but a better fighter was Nick Fatiou for the Rangers. Number 22. For the Rangers. Probably before your time, but I mean.
Well, I know the name.
He was from Staten Island. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, boxing champ, I believe. And let me tell you something. Nick Fatillo was a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, he could throw with the best of them. My Nick Fatillo, he was a decent fighter, but he was more of a pest with Sean Avery. Sean Avery is still one of my favorite Rangers to this day.
Oh, absolutely. Me too.
Samuelson, Chris Ebden mentions in the chat, Ulfie Samuelson. He was kind of dirty, but Ulf was another one that he wasn't afraid to throw down if need be. Ty Domi was another one who was the same.
Ty Domi also, yeah. And Ty Domi, pound for pound, and he was a small guy for the most part.
He was, but he'd fight bigger guys.
Probert, he's given up, 6 or 8 inches.
Times. He fought Bob Probert like 4, 5, 6 times in
one season, yes.
Yeah, Ebden mentions Esa Tikkanen too. Esa Tikkanen was another one who was, he liked to get with this Tikkanen.
No, but Tikkanen, now you're getting into like the Ken Linsman. You're getting into like the Rat. Yeah. Esa Tikkanen was an annoyer. He was a guy that can get under your skin. But he was never a tough guy.
No. Messier.
You want to talk about tough guy in that era, like the Messier and the Oilers and all that stuff? Marty McSorley, one of the best. Marty McSorley when he was with the San Jose Sharks at Madison Square Garden. We were doing a graduation for the police department. And they had to go to Chelsea Piers to do their pregame skate because they couldn't use the garden. And let me tell you something. I shook Marty McSorley's hand. His hand swallowed my hand. Swallowed. I mean, I didn't even know I had a hand when he was like, "Hey, nice to meet you." Great. And I mean, I was like, "Oh my God." I mean, it's huge.
And from what I hear, quick story on McSorley. I mean, from what I hear, off the ice, he's an absolute gentleman. But he gave an interview a number of years ago where he was saying that he didn't name the opponent, but somebody went after Gretzky and Messier. Messier could really defend himself. He didn't need anybody to step in for him.
Right.
It's ESPN somewhere.
Yeah, but they'd rather have him on the ice.
Right. So Gretzky, somebody went after Gretzky. McSorley tells a story where he goes in and the guy was spearing different guys and speared Gretzky. So he grabs the guy and throws him into the boards as he's going to the bench. And the referee's like, "Oh my God, Marty, you can't be doing that." Marty shoots back, calm as can be. "No, it's okay for him." He goes to the penalty box. So that's a great little sidebar there. No, this is not ESPN EMJE. This is the Mike David Podcast Owners, Volume 52 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. Our guest this evening is Mike Granton, who spent 7 of his years in the NYPD and Transit Police in EMRU. So a couple jobs I want to hit on. If you were there and if you weren't, it's fine. There's always, of course, the space cases and the man-unders, which was Transit's bread and butter. Airbags were also the bread and butter. And I'll hit in the Bratton years, too, but Union Square derailment in 91, and you weren't there. Trade Center bombing in 93.
Wait. Union Square derailment, working till 10 o'clock. The Union Square derailment happened at about 11:30. So I lived in Staten Island. We were reporting at the time, I believe, to Manhattan, Hudson and Vestry Street. And we had just gotten, because of Bratton, take-home radios. We were assigned our individual transit rescue, not the whole transit police. But we were assigned our take-home radios that not only received the transit police channels, but got all VHF channels. So guess what? Guess what else I was able to take home on a regular basis was Brooklyn Fire. Still, 20 years later, I'm still tuning into Brooklyn Fire. You could scan the channels and all. But anyway, I just walked in my door when they started putting out about a major derailment at Union Square. And I have to tell you, it was another thing that really was a totally unwritten rule, but I should have just got back in my car and went back to work. But I didn't feel I had the authority, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody to approve that. Because it happened again. It happened at the Union Square, and it also happened at a plane crash at LaGuardia Airport. Yeah. Which, again, we had enough people for 4 trucks. We only had 3 running trucks, so they sent me and my partner home. And that was the night that there was a plane crash at LaGuardia Airport, and all the transit trucks ended up going there. 89? Okay.
Was it 89? The anniversary?
Somewhere around there, yeah, where it skidded off a snowy runway.
Yep. Yeah, I think either 89 or 91, 92 around
listen, I got, I'm older than you. It don't come that easy. I don't know. But yes, it was right around there. It had to be before 93. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it was. I can't remember the exact plane crash, but there's pictures of it. It's like 92. It's snowy, and a plane did skid off the runway. So had you left EMRU by the time the Trade Center bombing happened in 93, or were you working there?
All right. So, again, another call where, yes, I had just left EMRU. I still had the radio. They hadn't come to take it away from me yet because it was, I don't know, a month or 2 after I got out of EMRU. And I had the radio, and I'm sitting in downtown Brooklyn in 300 Gold Street, which is where I was in driver training. and that's another story. But I'm in driver training. I'm sitting in there, and I hear the Trade Center bombing go down, and I hear Joe said he's on the 23rd floor climbing stairs looking for more people, and the trucks that were on duty were all there. But again, who am I calling to let me go there? And plus, I'm not in the EMRU anymore. I don't have an equipment. I don't have a Scott pack. I don't have we didn't carry spares on our truck. We were very, like you said before, we were very limited to our supplies. So, afterward, when I spoke to Joe, he said, "Oh, you should have just came, Mike. I would have put you to work." But I mean, I didn't have any protective gear. I didn't have any equipment. I had knowledge and I had skills, but I didn't have any equipment to operate with. So I did not go, and I was basically right over the Brooklyn Bridge. I feel terrible about this.
Because I remember Franco talking about this. Franco was there with Daryl Summers, Sergeant Said, and a few other guys that responded. And the thing that Franco remembered, which 8 years later, I think Franco was driving truck 4 when the Trade Center happened again on September 11th, 2001, is he said when he was climbing stairs in 93, because of how much he's carrying, Franco's a very, still to this day, he's a huge, strong guy. Franco's, puts the G in Jim Buff. So he can handle himself. But as he was climbing the stairs, you get tired, you start dropping things because it's so much flights to climb and you're carrying a hell of a lot of equipment. Right. So I think on the way down, one of the guys he said this to was Steve Driscoll, who went in and didn't come back out 8 years later. But he said to Steve, don't take the whole world up there with you because it gets to be a lot after a while.
Right.
And Driscoll took a lot of equipment, but it was a big job, as was the Union Square derailment. And it's a fun unit to work. I mean, you get a glimpse of the city, really citywide. And I guess before I hit on Bratton, just tell me about that. I mean, it was 6 years of your career, and it sounds like it was the funnest 6 years of your career because there's so much you get to do.
I had fun everywhere I went, but I mean, the Trade Center, again, those things are all, I'm loaded with survivor guilt when it comes to that stuff. So going back to EMS, before I even started working for EMS, Steve Kerr, myself, Howie Sickles, I'm trying to think of all the people that were in it. I think Billy Gross was in there. We started a club called Masters of Disaster, where we wanted to be at every big job in the city, regardless of whether it was a police job, a fire job, a rescue job, a building collapse, or whatever. We just wanted to be at everything. So we bought all these T-shirts and we had them silk screened or whatever, Masters of Disaster. And we were just a bunch of kids playing. I mean, we really had no responsibility at the time, except when you were on duty and doing something. I don't know. It's just you just want to be at everything. And then when you miss a big job, like 9/11, for instance, I mean, I should have been. I take the ferry to work. I would have been right there at like 8:30 in the morning. I was working for a commissioner. So, I could kind of make my own hours, give or take an hour. I get his schedule. So I just have to be there when he has to be somewhere because, I'm his aide/driver. So.
But then again, hey, listen, if you were there, maybe we wouldn't have in this chat right now. You never know. You never know.
True, too. Well, right. So
listen, everything for a reason.
I'm amazed that I'm still here, but I wasn't there with the big cloud when the buildings collapsed.
And thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness, because most of the people I know first of all, I knew more firemen. We used to hang in Rescue 1 all the time.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, it used to piss off ESU because we'd be hanging out with the fire department when it was the whole Battle of the Badge thing going on.
Yeah, at that time, yeah.
And they would call in man-unders at like Times Square or Penn Station. Well, again, I'm making an allegation here. I don't know if it's true. But I was told that some of their guys would call in man-unders because they saw our truck parked outside Rescue 1, FDNY Rescue 1. Mm-hmm. And but we had a radio that went right to the train master. So all we had to do was say, "Do you have a stoppage over there at Times Square on the on the number 1, 2? No. How about on the 4, 5, and 6? No stoppages. Everything's moving fine." Because when you have a man under, the first person that's going to report it is the motorman. Mm-hmm. The train goes into emergency when a body's under the train. So we had like a direct link to find out when the man under was legit. We knew it was legit. If it was a 9/11 anonymous unverified, we could call the train master and he could tell us, "No, nothing's going on at Times Square."
I got
So
a picture of the rescue
we'd
truck.
never leave Rescue 1. So then they started calling like internal affairs saying we weren't responding to our calls, which was funny because we were all super buffs and all ready to go to work and do anything, you know.
I was going to ask you too. You mentioned shoe flies earlier. I heard a rumor. I'm not sure if this is true. I'm going to pull up a picture of the rescue truck, and we'll talk about that momentarily before I move on to a couple other things to hit on in your career. But I heard a rumor that the way to be able to sniff out the shoe fly in transit was to do like a backwards count on the radio, something like that.
You know, I was never worried about it because I always tried to be where I was supposed to be. You know
Right.
what I mean?
No, yeah, you did your job, but I know that was one of the methods people would try. I think that was one of the methods people tried to use to sniff out the shoe fly, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't know. I know in the NYPD, because we always had their radio also. Even in 34, when I was in transit, you know, most of the stations in 34 are elevated.
Yeah.
So they gave you police, you know, New York's NYPD radios if you needed to call for help or anything. It was the only time a radio worked was when you were working in Coney Island.
Because it had the repeaters on it, right?
Well, you had they were all either elevated or open air lines. The D, the N, the F. Yeah. All elevated or open air stations. So you actually, you know, using an underground radio didn't work. So they gave us NYPD radios in Coney Island. So you would hear things like W08.
Yeah.
And that meant like the duty inspectors in the 6-1. You know, it meant nothing to me. I really didn't care where the duty inspector was. And I'd have to tell you a funny story about that. When I did get assigned to the Deputy Commissioner of Training's office, we had a deputy inspector. Actually, we had a full bird. John D'Agostino was the CO of our office. And John D'Agostino, so he had the duty once a month. And he'd say, hey, Mike, I got the Brooklyn duty. You want to drive me? Because I don't know Brooklyn. I know Queens. He goes, I don't know Brooklyn for nothing. I said, yeah, I'll drive. I know Brooklyn like the back of my hand. So I would drive him on the duty. And a couple of times, like we'd pull into the 7-1 precinct on Empire Boulevard. And he's in an unmarked car, but everybody knows it's a cop car. You know, it's a Crown Vick, you know, with the antennas all over it and the light package.
You might as well just put police on the side and call it a day. Exactly. It's not really unmarked.
Exactly. So we pulled there, right? He goes inside to go sign the blotter. I go in to take a leak, and as I'm walking into like the muster room, there's got to be 8, 9, 10 cops running out past me. So I said, what's going on? I thought somebody called a 13 or an 85. I said, what's going on? What's going on? They said, oh, the duty inspectors. Everybody's running. They're running to their cars. I guess they were all watching Rocky or something, or they were watching, you know, the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. I don't know what they were doing, but they were all sitting down. Whatever. I mean, you know, but they're all running because the duty inspector's here. I'm like, wait, I'm driving the guy. He's a nice guy. Don't worry about it. You know, he's not going to hurt you. I swear. And they just ran to the cars, took off, blah, blah, blah. And then they get on the radio and they say whatever they need to say that, you know, the duty inspector's at the 7-1. I didn't say it. I just laughed about it because, like I said, I never worried about it. Never in my life.
Of course. And you didn't really have a need to. So I was going to say, I mean, listen, that brings us into 1993. And I think, was it around this time that you got promoted? Because I was going to say, you're having, granted, you had fun everywhere, but you're having the time of your life.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure if you could have stayed in rescue, you would have. But
I would have. So, and even I had this discussion with Charlie Caperna. Charlie Caperna, when I said I wanted to, actually, it wasn't Charlie. It might have been Bob Gagan. Somebody had said to me, one of the bosses, could have been Richie Locke. I don't know. One of the bosses said to me, hey, you're within like 300 names on the transit sergeant's list. If you're still in the EMRU and you get promoted, you got to leave for a year before you can come back.
Yeah.
He said, but if you leave now and you get promoted in 3 months or 6 months, you can come right back into the unit. So I said, okay, let me go see what's, the position vacancy board, what's available. And the only thing that really was even halfway available that I was interested in was driver training. So, you know, and of course the bane was, and you could thank Dennis Healy for this, those who can do, those who can't teach, and those who can't teach driver training. So they just pounded me with shit like that, stuff like that. And anyway, so I ended up going to driver training. And I have to tell you, again, it was a blessing in disguise. So for the 9-10 years I'm on the transit police, I go to driver training. Every year, you got to submit a report that you want to get a CDL license, get bus trained, whatever. So you can go to details and maybe get a cushy detail driving a bus, either a city bus or a police bus or anything else like that. And every year I put in for it. But again, I didn't have a rabbi. I didn't have the hook. I didn't have the guy to get me into that training. So I put in 16 freaking reports twice a year, for 8 years, never got called. So now I get assigned to driver training. The first thing I do is I walk into the office. The guys that were there had left already. They're transferred out. So we got 5 new, and this is when Transit's going to start their own academy. So we had to build up a driver training unit. So 5 new people come in, including me. The big Rolodex on the desk. I go through the big Rolodex. I find bus training in the Bronx at the Hunts Point Depot. And I call up the guy, the card, whatever the number was. I said, how you doing? This is Officer Mike Granton over at Transit Police Driver Training. I said, we need a guy bus driver trained. You got any classes going in? He said, we just had a class started today. I said, do you have any vacancies? And he goes, I don't know. I'll let you know tomorrow. He says, where's the guy live? I said, Staten Island. He goes, I can't get you in Staten Island. I said, no, anywhere in Brooklyn, anywhere in Manhattan, anything's good. He goes, all right, I'll call you tomorrow. He calls me the next day. He says, hey, I got an opening. I can't get you in Staten Island, but I got the guy in Elmer Park, which is right off the 38th Street in the BQE in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. So I said, perfect. He goes, hey, tell the guy be there 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay, no problem. What's his name? Mike Granton. So this is me, Mike Granton, and I'm calling up and scheduling my own training. So the next thing I know, I go upstairs to operations, and I put in the log, Mike Granton from driver training. I put my shield and my tax number, has training at the bus garage for the next, I think it was a 10-day course, for the next 10 days. And I don't sign it. I just make an entry in the log. So the next thing I know, I go, and I get bus trained. And I pass the road test. I go to the thing. I drive a bus all day, every day for the next 10 days. And then when I come back, everybody says, where were you? I said, I was at bus training. It's in the command log. It is? Yeah. So they go back 2 weeks, and sure as shit, who put this in here? I don't know. I told them I was going to bus training, and somebody put it in. It was me. So I got bus training.
And that's back then. You guys had the arrest bus too.
I didn't drive that. Sal the Sponge drove that one around quite a bit. But, yeah.
Really a mobile processing center.
Yes. Yeah. It's just a regular city bus, though, with, some accoutrements in it. But
yeah, essentially. There's a transit police insignia on the side, too. And that's another Bratton mention. I was say, those 2 years that Bratton was there, it wasn't long, but think about it. And this is not hyperbole to say. And him and Jack Maple, too, the late, great Jack Maple. They started Comstat there, which kept track of these things. They brought in a new fleet. Transit Police, prior to Bratton coming in 1990, was practically begging for a merger. And to tell you the impact the man had on the agency, he left in 92 because he went back to Boston to be the police commissioner. And then he came to New York City in 94, pre-merger as the NYPD commissioner the first time. In 95, when the merger happened, they didn't want it. They were fighting it tooth and nail. It wasn't until Giuliani withheld the payroll that the merger happened.
We didn't have a choice. Only because of Bratton.
And so was housing. Housing had injunctions going on at the time.
So Bratton got us all brand new vehicles, patrol vehicles, ESU vehicles, buses, all brand new transit police vehicles, which we were always getting hand-me-downs. Like you said, second-rate stuff, everybody's leftovers. Or, Bratton was the cat's pajamas when it came to the transit police. Yeah. He switched the uniforms from dark blue, light blue to dark blue. Mm-hmm. Commando sweater, baseball hat if you wanted it, 9mm. He went to Ben Ward and said, I'm issuing my guys 9mm. So, make sure you tell your people a 9mm doesn't necessarily mean it's a mutt. And Ben Ward said, whoa, you can't do that. We have a pilot project going on. Like they had 15 or 20 guys out of the whole 24,000 man department. And they were evaluating the effectiveness of 9mm. And Bratton just looked at him and said, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So he goes, well, you can tell me all you want, but you ain't training them at my range, meaning Rodman's Neck.
Yeah, we'll pick another one then. He did.
He did. He went to
Calverton?
No, he went to Long Island, the Nassau Coliseum, the Islanders, right across the street. There was Union.
I'll look it up.
No, in the college right there. There was a big range right there. So he actually rented half the range for a year and trained the entire transit police department on 9mm.
Long Island.
The guy is fabulous.
Oh, of course. And then, again, he brought that same thing to the NYPD when he took it over in 1994.
Yes,
same thing. And around that time, you could see it in the episodes of Cops when they filmed with the NYPD in 1994, right after they filmed with you guys, that transition. Certain cops are still wearing what I call the Kansas City Royals blue uniforms before
Right.
they transition to darker ones. Even some of the ESU guys, you see the ESU
Right.
guys starting to wear the darker uniforms they still wear to this day. So even that was a simple morale booster. And that was the thing. So you come over, and that's anybody that lived through that and was involved in that in any capacity, that was an interesting time, because Bratton was on this show a while ago, as you know. And he told me straight up, he's like, you're probably never going to see anything like that again, where not just one police department, he'd been a part of mergers much smaller in Boston, but two come in. So you're getting a groundswell of personnel that got numbers in the NYPD to the largest they'd ever been. So going from the Mitchell Field, Bobby Gagan is saying, thank you, Bobby.
Yes, thank you, Bobby.
Appreciate you, Bob. So going from wearing the transit patch to, of course, the NYPD patch, a lot of the principles and the ways to do the job are the same, but nevertheless, there's certain personnel aspects to it. There's certain minor tweaks that might throw you off a little bit that you have to get used to. So you're 95, 96, 97. What was that like, getting used to, again, still doing the job, but doing it under an entirely different department?
Okay, so my driver training days, again, I didn't get promoted.
Okay.
And what happened was so here's the thing. A lot of transit cops benefited from that, and I didn't, because I was on the sergeant's list. Anybody on the lieutenant's list or the captain's list, which we had certified lists for lieutenant and captain, all the transit guys got made. Every sergeant that was on the lieutenant's list got made, and every lieutenant that was on the captain's list got made. They got promoted. But NYPD had a current, 6,500 man sergeant's list, person sergeant's list. And I was like 365 on a 600 man list. And they were up to like 323 or 330. So I was 30 names away, but they killed the list. They put our list at the back of theirs, and they never make their whole list. So I ended up dying on the list with getting promoted. So the whole leave and then come right back was out the window. So now the merge goes through, and I'm in driver training. I'm like in limbo, what I call it, right? So they send us out to Floyd Bennett Field to, but I guess I got to tell a story before that, though. They send us out to Floyd Bennett Field, me and Sal Cataya, the Sponge, to work with their NYPD driver training. And the people accepted us fine. The bosses, not so much. They thought we were plants, because now Jim O'Keefe, I sent you a picture of Jim O'Keefe too. Jim O'Keefe. This is him getting sworn in as the deputy commissioner of training for the second time by Kelly. But anyway, Jim O'Keefe was he was a guy that was brought in by Bratton, Jim O'Keefe and some woman named McDonald, and he called them executive assistants with the Transit Authority. And they were so we didn't have deputy commissioners or whatever. We had the chief and we had the whole uniform, but he didn't have any civilian. Well, Jim O'Keefe was a civilian. He got a doctorate in criminal justice from Houston. And Bratton brought him in as like an executive assistant, a guy to help me implement all the things I'm trying to implement. So, and again, Transit was starting their own academy in '93. So we were assigned to somewhere in Metro Tech over there, one of the theaters there, where they were going to do the hiring, all the kids coming in for hiring, like they do at NYPD, but we were now just separate transit police. So we go there, and Jim O'Keefe is going to give a speech to the new recruits. And he gives this whole speech about his son wanted to be an archaeologist. So he wanted him to hang a rope from a tree in the yard. And the doctor's going, hang a rope from the tree in the yard, archaeologist. He goes, you got your occupations reversed. So the kid says, no, I want you to hang a rope from the tree in the yard so that I could be an archaeologist. He said, I just saw it on TV. He goes, where'd you see it on TV? He said, Indiana Jones. So the kid thought Indiana Jones was what an archaeologist, an action adventure guy is an archaeologist. And
not quite.
And another part of the speech, he goes, anybody could be a doctor. This is in his speech to the recruits. He said, anybody could be a doctor. I could give you an address tomorrow. You could mail away, and in a week, you'd have a doctorate certificate. He said, but it don't mean nothing. You didn't have any growth. You didn't put anything into it. You don't get anything out of it. He goes, but you'll have a doctorate certificate that, you might be able to scam your way into a job. He was real personable, great speech, had everybody glued to him, right? So when the speech is over and we all go back to Gold Street, they come in and they hand us all new phone directories. And on the new phone directory is Dr. James O'Keefe's office. So I figured he's got a secretary, right? So I said, let me call. So I call James O'Keefe. I said, hey, Dr. O'Keefe, this is Mike Granton. I work downstairs. He's up on the 5th floor. This is Mike Granton. I work down on the 2nd floor in driver training. He goes, yeah, what can I do for you, Mike? I said, yeah, listen, you did a great speech today with those recruits. Everybody loved it. Everybody loves you. So he says, oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. I said, so listen, can I get that address where I can be a doctor by the end of the week? And he goes, I got to find something for you to do. And he hangs up the phone. So the following week, I call him again. Hey, Doc, this is Mike Granton. I've been checking the mail every day. I haven't gotten that address. Can you send me that address? He goes, don't you people have anything to do down there? I said, yeah, we're doing our job. I said, but I'm trying to be a doctor. Anyway, hang up the phone. The third time I go up to his office, but he's not in there. And he's got a big whiteboard. You know, when we went from chalkboards to whiteboards with the dry erase markers?
Yeah.
He's got like 70 things he wants to get done, like in the next 90 days. So I erased number 35, and I put number 35, get driver training MD certificates or MD address, something like that. So about an hour later, my phone rings at driver training. And I said, yeah, Officer Granton. And he goes, you wouldn't happen to have been in my office today, would you? I said, oh, no, Doc. I would never go in your. That would be trespassing going in your office. And you weren't in your office?
Me? Never.
Somebody screwed my whiteboard. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I would never do that. So he laughed about it. So finally, we get the certificates. And but so he actually cuts out of the back of the Village Voice. There's like those little personal ads. It says free PhD, right? P.O. Box 387, Tarzana, California. Well, I write. And I said, I want a free PhD. And they sent me this full color, trifolded brochure. It was beautiful. So now I go upstairs we had just started an instructional technology unit, Barry Kutcher and Sal DiGiovanni. And I walk in with this giant full color brochure and I said, listen, I just came from Dr. O'Keefe's office. He wants you to make up 5 of these certificates. And he goes, Dr. O'Keefe wants it? Yeah, right from Dr. O'Keefe's mouth. He told me to come down here, give this to you, and tell you to make up 5 of these certificates. Really? Yeah, you can check it out. Here, take this, 5 certificates. Don't give them to him, give them to me, because I got to do a presentation for him next week. Okay. So sure enough, they do it. Because everybody's afraid, Dr. O'Keefe, he's a big shot. He's above like every uniform person. The only person he answers to is Bratton. So now they do the 5 things. I go and get the cardboard police department frames, put them all in there. There's a girl in the cadet corps. Oh, please, she's going to kill me if I can't remember her name, Thomas. Anyway, she does calligraphy. And I tell her, hey, do me a favor. The 5 people in driver training, put our names on here, and we're going to be doctors. And she was like, oh, you're going to get fired. I was like, just put our names on it. We won't say you did it. She puts all our names on the certificates. We hang them up on the wall. I call Dr. O'Keefe. Hey, Dr. O'Keefe, yeah, it's Dr. Granton. I'm down in driver training. He goes, who? I said, well, I used to be Officer Granton, but I'm Dr. Granton now. We're having our big installation ceremony. We all became doctors. We want you to come down so all us doctors can hang out together. And he goes, all right, what time are you doing it? And I said, around noon. And this is like 10 o'clock in the morning. So he says, all right, I'll be there at noon. I said, all right, thanks. Hang up the phone, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's hysterical. Everybody thinks I'm the funniest guy in the world. Everybody loves it. Well, Dr. O'Keefe walks in the door, and he's got Captain Betts behind him. And Captain Betts has no sense of humor whatsoever. The vein in his forehead is like pulsating and going crazy. So they walk in the door. Dr. O'Keefe's got the biggest smile on his face ever. And I'm like, look, Doc, we all became doctors. Doctor of apologetics, doctor of missiology, doctor of this, doctor of that, doctor of divinity. He was like, oh, my God. Oh, you guys are fat. Here, come on. We ordered pizzas. Here, have a slice of pizza. Blah, blah. He has the slice of pizza. He plays along fabulously. And then he says, listen, I got to go upstairs because I got real work to do. So you guys keep up whatever it is you do. And he walks out the door. And Beth stays behind. And he was so angry. We were unshaven. We weren't in uniform. Oh, my God. I want you guys shaven in dress uniform in front of my desk in 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Oh, boy.
Oh, my God. So now they're all cursing me out. Oh, look what you did now, Mike. Blah, 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 blah. So fast forward to 97. And now I'm out of driver training. And the lieutenant there gets a phone call. The deputy commissioner of training would like to have a meeting with Officer Mike Granton on 3:00 on Wednesday. So she calls me. I got recruits in the car. I'm somewhere at Flatbush driving around and then marked RMP, teaching driving. And she gives me a 10-2 forthwith. So I go back to the command. I said, "What's up?" She goes, "I knew there was something wrong with you being here. Why does the deputy commissioner of training want to see you?" I said, "I don't know." She goes, "Well, look, yeah, I just got a notification. You're going to meet with him at 3:00 on Wednesday. And what's this with 3:00? You get off duty at freaking 3:00. I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Well, you're going to change your hours." And all right, whatever. So I end up going to see the deputy commissioner of training. And he says, "Michael." I said, "Yes." He goes, "I want you to come work for me." I said, No. I said, listen, I live in Staten Island. I work in Brooklyn. Floyd Better Field. Everybody's going towards Manhattan. I'm going towards the other way. I got no traffic going to work. I park my car. I got 700 parking spots to choose from.
Must be nice.
Huh?
Must be nice.
Yeah, exactly. I said, no fighting to park or no struggling with rush hour, no nothing. I said, it's not like I have a parking spot like you do at this beautiful building. I said, number 3, my phone voice sucks. I'm a computer illiterate, and you don't want me in an office. It's like, it's like having a bull in a china shop.
Right.
And he looks around and he says, "See all those people out there?" And he points to his outer office. He goes, "All those people can type. They can all operate a computer, and they can all answer a phone. That's not what I want you for." I said, "Okay, what do you need?" So he goes, "I need somebody I can trust." Now, how do you answer that? You can't trust me? And he knew from horsing around with the doctorate certificates, that's the only way he knew me. And I found that out later when the secretary said to me, "When you came and delivered the mail last week, Dr. O'Keefe yelled out the door to me and said, 'Who was that guy?' And he said, 'It's Mike Granton. He used to work for you at Transit.' He goes, 'Yeah, that's where I knew him from. Tell him I want to meet with him next week.' He don't do meetings. You order him when to be here, and he comes here." So anyway, I told him, "Listen, I have a handicapped daughter at home. My wife went back to nursing school. I said, I have issues with schedule juggling. So I really don't know if I can do it. Can you give me till Monday and I'll give you a realistic answer?" I said, "But I have to tell you, I'm leaning towards no. You need somebody else." I said, I have no problem with the trust issues, but coming to Manhattan, putting on a suit. I said, I only own 2 suits. I own a wedding suit and a funeral suit. That's it.
About all you need in most walks of life.
He was like, "Hey, come on, try it for 6 months. If you don't like it, I'll put you anywhere you want to go on the job." Needless to say, I was there for the next 7 years and before I retired. And then
doing a lot, because at this point, it's safe to say, you finished out, of course, in 05, but at that point when you got there in 1997, you had a dozen years in the job. So the big lesson, and I guess I'm going to have you answer one of the rapid fire questions early because you answered one of them already with did you ever deliver a baby, is you're getting these guys, some of which they already got a decent amount of time on the job. Other guys, they got time on, but they're newer, 2-3 years. You got a dozen on. You worked underground. You've been above ground for a couple of years, but it's not like your transit experience is null and void. What were you trying to teach these guys? What were the biggest things you were trying to focus on, through Howard Safer's NYPD when you first got there, into Bernie Carrick's NYPD, and then lastly, Ray Kelly's NYPD?
I didn't do teaching. I answered only to the commissioner, which was a great thing also.
That's nice. Yes.
Yeah. He basically, I didn't have a boss. We had a chief of the police academy, and we had a deputy inspector who, of course, I respected to the ends of the earth. John D'Agostino. And when he left, we got Joyce Stevens, a black female, who I have to tell you, I was worried to death that she was going to be a special interest person. Mm-hmm. She was one of the best bosses I ever worked for.
That's good.
And but even her, I had about 18 years on the job, and she calls me into her office and she says to me, "Detective Granton," she goes, "I just got something from the chief of department's office concerning you." And I said, "Really? What could you have gotten?" And she says, "You're under special monitoring." I said, "Uh-oh, what did I do now?" And she says, "Well, according to the paperwork they sent me," get this now, you ready? "You've never written a summons. You've never written a juvenile report. You've never made a collar. You've never done police work. You're a 0 from one end of the columns to the other. You have no record of any activity on this job." So I just start laughing. She goes, "What do you have to say for yourself?" And I said, "I'm a big 0. And she goes, no, sir, give me something to throw at them. And I said, I can't throw anything at you. I said, let me just say this. So when we went through the merge, 300 Gold Street was basically Transit Police headquarters, right?
Yeah, in Brooklyn, right?
In Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, right at Tillery Street, right across the street from the Super Pumper and the 8-4 precinct.
Yeah.
Okay, so 300 Gold Street. So we weren't supposed to lose anything. They were supposed to start keeping, Transit, we turned in our memo books, and we had small memo books, so we went through them a lot. NYPD, they have a big, long memo book, and when you're done with it, you keep it, and you log out the next one, and you keep them in series type of thing. You where the last, almost like your checkbook, with the last check and the date you wrote on that one, and then the first check and the date on the next one, and it just keeps going for your whole career. Well, with Transit, we didn't do that. We had a very small book. We had to make 20-minute entries, and we handed in the book. So I might have been on my 60th or 70th book, but I wasn't in possession of any of them. If I got called for court, I had to go to like equipment and supply, give them the date of the incident, blah, blah, blah. And they would have to go find the book and hand it to me so I could produce it in court. Okay. So now when the merge goes through, Sal, I'm going to mention him again, Sal the Sponge Katea, who also worked at 300 Gold Street.
It's a classic New York name.
Sal the Sponge. Well, Sal the Sponge is the prodigal son. So he was the guy, when Bratton came to the Transit Police, he had left to roll over to the NYPD, and he didn't like being treated like a rookie again. He had like 8 years on, and he rolled over, and they treated him like a rookie, so he came back. So we called him the prodigal son, and Bratton made a big deal about the fact that how great the Transit was, that this guy who got to go to the great NYPD came back to the Transit Police. So Sal the Sponge was the prodigal son. But anyway, so Sal the Sponge is working at Gold Street after the merge, and he sees a dumpster out in front of Gold Street that people that took over the Gold Street units, buildings, offices, they were clearing out the offices and throwing everything in the dumpster. Things like my personnel folder, not mine, hundreds of them. So he started going through the folders, and he knew all the range guys. He knew, every name he knew. He took it through in the trunk of his car. He must have taken 300 personnel folders and put them in the trunk of his car because they were throwing them out. And they were supposed to keep them as, for life.
Right.
Records of what you did with your whole career. But apparently the NYPD don't have them. So the inspector calls me in the office, and she's telling me I never did anything. I said,
They men in black them.
Huh?
They men in black them.
I couldn't tell her because technically it's not legal for me to have my personnel folder.
Right.
But I had my own personnel folder because they threw them out. Whoever took over the offices in 300 Gold Street, which that was another thing, they were fighting over the offices. We'd have a sticker on the door that says this office now belongs to Field Investigations, Field Internal Affairs. But there's a combo lock. There's a key, but there's also a combo lock on the door. And me and the Sponge were the only ones who knew the combo lock. So we'd be in there, and guys would be pounding. Sergeants, lieutenants, captains would be pounding on it. If anybody's in there, open up. And we didn't. We never said a word because we had all driving simulators in there. And we were told to guard the simulators until they found someone to donate them to, which they found some high school in Queens that they eventually donated them to.
Didn't work out.
But anyway, so I was a zero, and that's what she came up with. And, I couldn't tell her I had my own. She goes, so did you make calls? Yeah, I made a couple calls. Listen, I didn't change the world. I probably made 12 callers in my whole career, period. When you get into rescue, you don't make callers. You hand things off. They get
and I'm sure she knew that. Listen, I was in a specialized unit. We didn't really focus on the rescue. We could if we needed to, but it wasn't our main.
When you're the commissioner's aide or the commissioner's driver or whatever, you don't make callers. No matter what.
This doesn't happen.
Yeah, you don't make callers.
You weren't hiding. You were working. It's different if you were hiding, trying to avoid work. You weren't.
I loved my job. I loved my job. But then when Jim O'Keefe left, then we got, which was right before 9/11, a month before 9/11.
August of 2001. Okay.
Yeah. So he left about a month before maybe 2 months before 9/11. So I kind of didn't have a boss. And then we ended up getting Carrick assigned a federal guy, Frank Stroud. He became the commissioner. But Frank Stroud wasn't a born and bred NYPD guy.
Yeah.
So nobody wanted to play ball with him. Mm-hmm. I have to tell you, I felt terrible because I wasn't a born and bred NYPD guy. I was a transit cop. The all my connections, all the people that knew me over my career were all in the New York City Transit Police. They were not in the NYPD. So here I am walking around the executive staff of the NYP with the new executive who nobody even wants to talk to. They don't look at them. They don't even greet them. I mean, it was horrible, to be honest with you. So,
yeah, I could see that. And I was going to say, I mean, that brings us into 05 when you left. I mean, at that point, were you looking to do, everybody says they're going to do 20 and out, but it's hard to actually walk away. Some guys stay longer. Were you at that point where it's like, you know what? It's not the job it was, and you walked away?
Yeah, I had a cushy job. I could have stayed for another 20 years, to be honest with you, because my job, I mean, again, but I didn't feel like I was being effective. I was no longer proactive, so to speak. You know, I did the best I could for O'Keefe. With Straub, I kind of felt very inadequate for what I just told you. I wasn't really an NYPD guy. I didn't have, my hooks in different. I did have, believe it or not, I refereed ice hockey for 25 years. So one of my biggest advocates on my side was the chief of internal affairs, Charlie Campisi.
Ah, yes, a name I know very well.
Campisi, who threw his own driver under the bus when her place got burglarized, but that's a whole nother story. Yeah. He asked me to be his driver when O'Keefe left. And I said to him, but he was a Queens guy. And I'm a Brooklyn, got married and moved to Staten Island guy.
Yeah.
And I kind of said to him, Chief, as much as I love, hanging out with you and dealing with you and talking hockey, I said, I just, I don't feel like I'm a good fit for you. So, and he kind of just moved on and got somebody else. But he was the only other executive in the police department that I kind of felt comfortable with. But another thing, in headquarters, I'm up in the elevator, and sure enough, the name's going to come up again. So Joe Lacaraza, who's now a sergeant in the detective bureau, is on an elevator at 1 PP, and I get on the elevator. And he says, hey, that guy with the fat head up in the front, is that you, Mike Granton? And I said, oh, sounds like a Brooklyn kid. And it was Joe Lacaraza. And he goes, did your commissioner? Oh, Jim Fife. That was another one. He died in office. But he was also very liberal. And I didn't necessarily like working for Fife. And I wasn't Fife's aide. Fife brought in a new kid.
Didn't he die of cancer?
He did.
Yeah.
While sitting as the commissioner. But he was like I said, he was, what I didn't like about him is he went all around the country as a police expert, and he basically sunk the cop 9 out of 10 times. Whoever paid him to say whatever, that's kind of what he said. He was an expert witness.
Yeah, whatever you needed him to be. Yeah.
Number 2, on his office wall, as soon as he moved into the office, he put up a letter from Chief Gates from LAPD.
Yeah.
And what a boob he was, what a nincompoop, what an idiot, how incompetent he was, how he didn't know anything about fighting crime. And I said, why would you hang a letter up like this? And he kind of looked down his nose at me and said, sometimes a man's better off judged by his enemies than his friends. And I said, so you're proud of this? He goes, yeah, the guy's a jerk, and he thinks I'm a jerk, so that makes me look great. And I was like, really? I don't know. I always thought the guy was a pretty good chief.
I'm going to say, yeah, there's a lot of guys who worked for Daryl Gates on the LAPD during those years who absolutely adore the man to this day.
Well, they kept trying to do away with police chases, and he was like, so what do you want us to do? Wave to them as they drive away from the scene of an armed robbery or the scene of a murder or the scene of a, whatever?
Controversial guy, but listen,
police work.
Probably one of the best chiefs the LAPD's ever had.
I agree. And one of the things that's written in the law that we don't enforce is that when you're fleeing a crime scene as the criminal, you're responsible for anything that happens. But somewhere along the line, the media and the public made it the cops' fault. Same thing with why I don't agree with the body cams now. Because nobody reviews the body cams. Nobody looks at
context is missing in that.
Exactly, context. Look at George Floyd, right? All you've seen for thousands of hours on the news is maybe 2 to 3 minutes of the 3 cops sitting on George Floyd. You didn't see how berserk he went for the 20 minutes before that when they were trying to put him in the car and the 3 cops couldn't even keep him in the car or get him in the car or whatever. He was a raving lunatic. You didn't see any of that. But, again, it's all context.
Even now, there was just a shoot, I think, in Queens. A kid was lunging at cops with the knife, and the cops got hit with misconduct charges on that. But they, again, the kid lunged at them with the knife. What are they supposed to do? Get stabbed?
Right. So I'm going to say it again because, nobody knows the case unless I say the chokehold cop, but I hate saying it. The guy's name is Daniel Pantaleo.
Yeah, the audience knows.
Pantaleo showed up and he did his job. He was, 5'7", 140 pounds going up against a 6'3", 350 pound. Well, I don't know if I'm exactly.
No, he was a big guy.
Don't raise your eyebrows.
No.
I'd be exaggerating one way or the other. I'm just saying he was a little kid going up against a big guy who said, "Not today, officer. I'm not going."
No, yeah.
Said, well, listen, you're under arrest. So, if you're going to fight me, it's just going to be extra charges. And he wanted to fight.
Yeah.
So he put him in a headlock and threw him to the ground. Now, if you think I don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the video. And again, it's another disappointing thing for me. Go watch the video and count out loud 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 for when you can't hear that guy saying something. Because he says, "I can't breathe," almost through the whole thing from when they throw him down on the ground and dogpile on a rabbit. If you say, "I can't breathe," you're not in a chokehold. If you're wheezing and coughing, you're not in a chokehold. If you're in a chokehold, you can't move any air at all. Count the silence. You'll never get more than 5. That's not a chokehold. I'm sorry. Ask any MMA fighter. The guy was never in a chokehold, but yet he's world famous as the chokehold cop.
Well, one of my lieutenants is a former MMA fighter. He gave it up when he went into the fire service. So, listen, he would know. Shout out to Lieutenant Amendola. If you're watching this, you would know, and you would be able to opine on that. So now, listen, it's tough, again, and it's a physical job, as because sometimes, listen, you're not trying to wake up and fight people on your given tour, but sometimes you got to throw hands and you got to know how to handle yourself.
I just thought I was getting old for the police department, and I actually felt like I was going to do something where, and again, Joe Lacaraza in the elevator offered me. He said, "You could get rid of the suit and I'll get you all the overtime you want." I was in my last 3 years, so I actually said, "Yes, I'll do it."
Yeah.
And he wanted me to go to the detective bureau and work in cop shot, which is the people that when a cop gets shot, you drive around in the van and you announce that we're offering a reward. If you saw anything, call us, blah, blah, blah. And he said, "You'll make all the money in the world. You don't have to wear a suit. You could just wear jeans and a shirt and a gun belt or whatever." He said, "You just drive around in this van." I said, "Where do I sign up?" And there was another transit guy, Tommy Sullivan was his personnel officer. So he said, this should be Tommy Sullivan, knew me my whole career.
I know that name too.
Fine, great, no problem. So I put in the application and then never heard anything. So now 3 days later, he's calling me and going, "Where's your application?" I said, "I sent it already. What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, Tommy never saw it." I said, "Well, I sent it through channels. I don't know. I got my boss signed it. They sent it out." I said, "Where's it go from there?" He goes, "It only goes to the chief of department and the police commissioner." Now, my company sergeant in the police academy in 1985, Jay Valentin, worked in the police commissioner's office. So I called him up. "Hey, Jay, I need you to do me a favor. This is the first time in 20 years I'm asking Jay for a favor." And I said, "I put in a transfer to go to the detective bureau. I've been a detective for 7, 8 years. It shouldn't be a problem. And it's for cop shot, and they can't find it." So he said, "All right, let me look into it, Mike." So he looks, and he calls me back. First, he says he can't find it. It never got here to the police commissioner's office, which is the only 3 steps it goes to. Chief of department, police commissioner, back to the detective bureau from a deputy commissioner's office. So he can't find it. He can't find it. All of a sudden, he calls me back a couple of days later. And now the detective bureau is freaking out because they want to put me in there, but they can't without a paperwork. And he says, "Oh, by the way, the chief of department's holding up your transfer." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "They told me because you're under investigation." Here I am again. What did I do now? I'm under investigation. What am I? I'm back to being a zero? I mean, I don't know. What did I do? So they said, my sister's boyfriend, who I call Butch the Family Felon, he got arrested for driving call girls to their Johns.
As you do.
And you know what he had? He had last year's PBA card. Where the shield number should be, it said chief of department. So now the chief of department wants to know, where did this dirtbag get my PBA card? Now, meanwhile, I had gotten the PBA card. I knew all the delegates. I knew all the people. I didn't go to the chief of department's office again, but somebody gave it to me. I had PBA cards stacked up on my kitchen counter. I was separated pending divorce. I was living alone. I had them all over my house. I even was making displays out of them and everything else like that. But he even told them, the investigators, "Oh, my girlfriend's brother's a cop, and he was throwing it out, and I asked him if I could take it. And he said, yeah, which I don't remember that at all. But, you know, I always gave the guy a PBA card anyway. And I told him if they call me one more time about you not wearing a seatbelt, I'm going to tell them to lock you up. Because I used to get called like every other day. Anyway, that's why I didn't get transferred. And by the time they interviewed me, which I even went to Capizzi and said, come on, interview me already. It's all bullshit. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, you got to know. You're the chief of internal affairs. I'm under internal affairs investigation. Go look it up. Mike Granton, go look it up. And, you know, Capizzi was not the type of guy, he wouldn't do you a favor, but I wasn't asking for a favor.
But I was asking for a fair shot.
Yeah. I didn't do anything wrong. Let's just get this as water under the bridge and move on so I can get transferred.
Right.
Well, I never got transferred. So that kind of soured me. And I have to tell you, the straw that broke the camel's back, we're getting ready now. I'm ready to retire. I'm sitting there. We get news articles this thick of everything having to do with the police department and the commissioner's office. All the commissioners, all the executives get news articles every day from every paper in the country that writes about the NYPD. Well, one of the news articles was the traffic agents that started using very police-like cars and wearing police-like uniforms. Well, a traffic agent was suing the police department. He only had like a year on the job because he wanted to wear his turban with a cap device.
That's an interesting visual.
He wanted to wear a turban with a cap device. This is 2005. This is when I turned around to the secretary for the deputy commissioner of training and said, I'm going to walk over to Broadway and go up to pension and ask them how much they'll pay me to stay home. And that was kind of like the straw that broke. I said, I don't belong here.
Yeah.
So sure enough, I got off my desk. I walked over there. They told me, you don't have to apply. You don't have to appear one more day. I said, well, I have to. I got to clear out lockers, uniforms. I had stuff all over the place that I had to take care of and get in order. But still, that was it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. But a good run, though.
It was time to go. I just felt like it was time to go.
And you knew, and you went. And I don't blame you. I mean, listen, you had a hell of a run between Transit Police, obviously, EMS too, Transit Police, and ultimately the NYPD.
Did
and
you
obviously
show Joe said Bobby Farrell? Victor, did you show Joe said Bobby Farrell? Bobby Farrell could be the splitting image, the doppelganger to my buddy Tony Cavanero in Suffolk County.
Well, you're showing it, so we don't need to.
He lives right next door to me. And Rocky's best friend all through high school. So when Rocky got off work with me in Transit Rescue, he went home and him and this guy, Tony, had a car repair business. And when I saw this picture, I said, wow, I didn't know Tony Cavanero knew Joe said, but it's not. It's Bobby Farrell.
Joe's looking good, though.
Joe looks good. Yeah. Well, this is an older photo, too. I don't know how old, but Joe looked good.
Yeah.
Joe was a great guy. Me and Joe, for some reason, never got along. We never worked the same shift. I was never in his squads. And when I was leaving rescue, I kind of blasted Joe for not accepting me. After 5-6 years of being a rescue, I said, I never felt accepted by you, and that kind of hurt me. But he took it kind of hard too. But I love Joe said. Like I said, when you do training, you get to do the whole, in Patty Pogan's word, the whole Craftsman toolbox with the stuff.
Well, Patty's in the chat. He's been watching. And hi, Patty. Good to see you. Glad you're feeling better these days.
I can't believe I didn't know Patty Pogan on the job. But, people all told me we had very similar, career paths. And I really didn't know Patty Pogan.
Well, he was a lieutenant in EMS.
Yeah, in Manhattan, though, right? I think because I was in Brooklyn. I was in Brooklyn my whole career.
And then he got onto the PD. 86 is when he went to emergency. He was in emergency 86 to 98 before he went to the JTTF, and that's where he finished out right after 9/11.
Very nice.
So Patty and Mike Gore were tied at the hip, and those two had excellent careers together on the PD across the board.
I watched his show.
Patty's or Mike's?
No, Patty.
Patty's one of my, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, it was fun. Patty made my job very easy like you did tonight because Patty was one of my longer interviews. I think Patty had the original record, which has since been broken by Rich Miller, who was a Truck 4 guy, and Rich was also a great interview, as were you tonight. And it's funny because now we're going to go into the rapid fire, which hopefully will be sponsored pretty soon. And I'm looking at it. And
I never did anything, so I might not be able to answer any of these questions.
That's fine. Two of them you already did because one of them was going to be, did you ever deliver a baby? We're good there.
Yeah, about 9. I'm up to 7, 8, or 9. I was very disappointed that nobody ever named the baby after me, though.
Well, I mean, listen, they should have.
Yeah, well.
Especially with a common name like Mike.
I don't know.
throw it a bone, make the job easy for the mom. The name's as common as can be, at least here in the States. So, again, a couple of mics, I can relate. I feel your pain as a fellow Mike.
Thank you.
I get it. So, first one is, could have been an EMS, could have been in transit. Funniest call you ever responded to?
Funniest?
Yeah.
I don't. It was funny at the time. I don't know if anybody else will find it funny, but I was working with my future wife. We were kind of like just dating at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a New Year's Eve, and we got a call for a person stabbed. And when we got there was a woman in a nightgown, kind of like sexy nightgown, and a guy with a knife. And I don't know how she did it, but it went between his eyelid and his eye, straight down like this into his sinus. And he don't want to get her in trouble, so he's swearing that he fell on the knife. And we just couldn't stop laughing, to be honest with you, that the guy fell on the knife. I just, couldn't believe it.
Now, I'll skip the second one because that was, did you ever deliver a baby? Third one, so it's 4 out of 5. I'm asking you. Most uplifting call you ever had in either EMS or Transit Police?
I had a few things. I have to tell you, I saved my father's sister, my aunt. I think Mitch Stern was the paramedic on the call. Joey Bertay was one of the EMTs. I was off duty sleeping. My father dragged me out of bed, said, go down and get in the car and bring your medical kit. And my aunt was in cardiac arrest. And we beat the ambulance there. I started CPR. They showed up and continued CPR. The medics did their thing. And she actually ended up coming back, doing 11 days in the hospital and being released. And it was the best feeling in the world.
Very nice. Third question really of the rapid fire, the 4 that you'll be asked. When you were out on the road, either in the ambulance, riding the bus, or riding in the rescue unit, what was your favorite place to stop and get a bite to eat in the city?
Oh my God, I eat everything.
You can say multiple.
All right, I love Katz's Deli. Send the pastrami to your boy in the army.
Classic choice.
I also love Kum Cow. Kum Cow is a Chinese restaurant in Brooklyn that started as a little storefront like door with no name, no sign, no nothing, but there would always be a line out. We thought it was a crack house. But it turned out it was a Chinese restaurant that they ended up buying the whole block. It's in Fort Greene section of Brooklyn. Best Chinese food ever. Kum Cow.
Right.
Richie Locke, God rest his soul, was the one who basically turned us on to it. And Richie Locke was the Midnight Sergeant for the longest time in Transit Rescue, and it was awesome. Even better than going to Chinatown, which we could always go to Chinatown, but we always went to Kum Cow.
Yeah, if the food's good and you got the spot.
I think it's still there, but I don't know how to food. I haven't ate there in 20 years.
I'll have to look it up and see if it's still there, because that might be one of the spots.
KUMKAU, Kum Cow.
KUMKAU. All right. And the last question of rapid fire is fitting because the NYPD's got an academy class going in right now. Once these kids graduate, let's say you can pull one of these new guys and gals to the side. I'll ask that question momentarily, Dennis. So it's not going to be the last question, rapid fire. Second to last. What advice would you give guys getting on the job now?
Go back to school and become a doctor. Become an airline pilot. So I have to tell you, it's not the job I left. It's not the job I took, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But once they put in, and I don't know if they canceled that or not, but once they put in the whole, if you compress somebody's neck or chest, you can be held personally liable. So here's another thing. My nephew got into trouble with the NYPD because he was named in a civil suit. Well, a civil suit against the city, we never worried about that. As long as you didn't commit a crime and you did your job, you may not have done it to, what everybody's standard was, but you did it to the best of your ability. You never worried about indemnification. The city was going to indemnify you. They were going to pay anything to make that go away. And nowadays, that's not the case. So I don't know if I would put myself, you know what I mean? It's hard for me to talk to somebody taking the job today because we're not talking about the same job anymore. So I'm not really sure what advice to give them other than, be truthful, be honest, and do the best you can.
And it's not bad advice. Simple, but to the point. So Dennis Healy submitted this at the buzzer, so this will be the last
Dennis Healy!
Dennis Healy said,
Jackie!
Hi, Dennis. Ask Mike.
I love Dennis Healy.
About telling Dave Brown he would fight him on his front lawn.
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't my fight. It was in Madison Square Garden. So we went there. We were watching Edmonton. He wasn't with the Philadelphia Flyers at the time. He was with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
And we're watching it. We're pressed up against the glass where the Zamboni comes in and out. And I turn around, and standing right next to me is Dave Brown. He wasn't dressed for the night for the Edmonton Oilers. And I said, holy shit, are you Dave Brown? And he goes, yeah. So I said, let's go. Come on, let's go in the rotunda. I want to give it a shot. I want to try the heavyweight. And he goes, oh, stop, just stop. And I was like, no. Honestly, I thought you would be big. Like when I met Marty McSorley, I was impressed.
Marty McSorley's a giant.
The guy was wide, the guy was thick, and the guy had huge hands. Dave Brown was just tall and thin. And I was like, wow, I'll fight you any day of the week. Let's go. And he was so embarrassed by it, but and I was just busting chops. I didn't want to fight the guy. I didn't have nothing against the guy. But, but he just, Dennis Healy. Tell him about the ice cream on the dashboard with Dennis Healy. When Joe said came out, so I put ice cream on the dashboard because we're getting a call. And Dennis keeps taking his nightstick, trying to knock my ice cream off the dashboard. And I keep knocking it away. Finally, it hits the windshield and sprayed the whole windshield. So Joe comes out. And now Joe's doing like a Sherlock Holmes investigation on the windshield. And I'm saying, yeah, Rock must have spit up and hit it or whatever. And Joe's going, I don't know. It feels like it's cracked from the inside. I said, well, it's not cracked from the inside. I was eating ice cream. Ice cream ain't going to crack the window. But Dennis Healy's nightstick could. Anyway.
Allegedly. And hi to Dennis and hi to Pete Segretti, another former E-Man in the chat. Good to see all of you. It was a great show, man. This was a really fun show. I'm glad it took us a while to get it on the board, but I'm glad we did. So before I say my goodbyes to the audience, if you got any shout outs, Mike, fire away.
Oh, everybody. I don't know. Billy Gross, of course. I wouldn't be here without Billy Gross, Steve Kerr, Mark Peck, Dennis Healy. I got a whole bunch of funny stories with Dennis Healy, but I went way over anyway. So
that's fine.
Yeah, I tell you, I also sent a group photo of all the EMRU guys, and I have to tell you, it's the salt of the earth. They're the best guys. Oh, and I also sent you a group photo. Zach Goldfarb and his wife are in here, and Steve Kerr and his wife are in here.
Oh, nice.
He's in here. Howie Sickles is in here. Yeah, a whole bunch of people. We were on a cruise, I don't know, probably 15 years ago. But
all right, anyway, very nice. Very nice.
All first responders. It was really nice. Listen, just fabulous. Even my ex-wife, I had the best of all worlds, but, I just couldn't hold on to it.
Well, listen, everything happens for a reason in life. There's seasons of change in life, and here you are, still kicking, able to deliver some great stories. Shout out to Melinda, who helped us figure out the technical difficulties before we went on the air. Excuse me. So big shout out to Melinda. Thank you very much for your assistance earlier. And again, shout out to everybody who tuned in tonight. This show can't function without an audience, and because of having such a great audience and all of you, this show is able to keep on going. So stick around. We will talk off air, Mike. Coming up next on the Mike in New Haven podcast, as I mentioned earlier, the Shark, as he's known, another legend of New York City EMS, was there before the merger with the FDNY, was there after the merger with the FDNY. He's got a lot of stories. He helped decorate this lovely backdrop I have here behind me. You can't see all the patches, but some of them are EMS. And that's Mitch Stern himself, who will be here this Friday at 6 for another volume of the best, the bravest interviews with the FDNY's elite. And next Monday, writer, actor, police officer, worn a lot of hats, Joe Badalamante. Will be on this program again next Monday at 6 p.m. So we got a lot of PD shows coming up. We'll dip back into FD shows. Of course, this Friday's an FD show, but we'll dip back into FD shows in October as we look to mix it up to round out the year. Again, as I mentioned at the top of the show, in light of what happened yesterday, if you know anybody who's struggling, just, keep an eye on your people, the people in your life, take care of them. If you see anybody's feeling down, make sure, just give them a little quick text, give them a little quick message, and just check in on your people. You never know who's battling what. It's important that we stay on top of that because we always want to make sure we're there to help people in their time of need. And my condolences to that retired MOS's family. I wish, we could have gotten to that person in time. But hopefully, the next time with someone else, there'll be a different outcome, and that'll be fresh in our minds to be able to make a difference. So again, my condolences. So thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. Again, thanks to producer Victor, always on the ones and twos. For those of you listening in on the audio side, it's from their 1976 album, Dreamboat Annie. Heart comes your way with Magic Man. In the meantime, on behalf of Mike Granton, producer Victor, and all of you in the audience, I'm Mike Colón. This has been volume 52 of the E-Men inside the NYPD's Emergency Service Unit. And as the E-Men like to say, anytime, baby. Take care, have a good night, and I'll see you Friday with Mitch the Shark Stern.